Hello, hello, hello. Happy Thursday. Hey, Noodles. How's it going? Oh, hi. Happy Thursday. We've made it. Oh, hello. It you, it me, it us. I spent most of the chunk of my day working on pants. I'm sewing a pair of pants. My I wanted to finish them today. As of now, I have to just hem the legs and then I'll be done if I don't add other things, which I might add other things, but we'll see. Creating creating from scratch. Yeah, we'll see. They're like I should have brought a picture over. They are like super wide lead to the point where like it looks like I'm wearing a skirt but I'm not. And like the front part is like pleated a little bit, and then the back, like waistband, is all like elasticy and bunchy. And they're super long. Like, I am doing a 3.5 inch hem, which is like this big, which is not normal. And even that is like still long. So I'm excited. Excuse me. I'm gonna be wearing it or them at C2E2 on Friday. So if you're at C2E2 on Friday and you see me, say hi. Yes, to make giant raver pants in the 2000s. Yes. We all have our very specific reasons. Yeah, like I used to sew and then I just didn't for a very long time. And then like December, November, I don't know when it was, I got back into it and I made a cute little skirt and now I'm making pants. What will she make next? I don't know. Probably something adorable though. So yeah, that was my day, and like it's black material, like no other design on it, just black, and it's like a little crinkly. And so because it's crinkly, it's stretchy, and it's really hard to not like stretch it when you like iron. It's a whole thing. Far away, it'll look very nice. But if you're really good at sewing and you get closer, you'll see lots of mistakes. But it's fine. I'm okay with it. It's good enough. But yes, I hope all of your Thursdays were great. I will. Yes, I will post a picture. Absolutely. Excuse me, no. My pants ran out of thread, and I was like, all right, well, I have to go out anyway. Might as well make now the break. It's it's fine. It's fine. But yeah. Yeah. Making clothes is always an adventure. I mean, crafting in general is usually an adventure, and I go in very confidently most of the time, and then I just have to take out what I just did because I was far too confident. Stream got a little yes. It's so yeah. I don't have any reading updates. I did no reading yesterday and no reading today. So there you go. So I guess we'll just hop in. We'll do it. We'll do it to it. And you can tell that I don't wear this shirt often because like the little like hanger marks are coming out on the sides. It is a day today. It is a day. It's all right. So, today we are reading Storm Over Warlock by Andre Norton, and we're starting with chapter 12. We are 56% of the way through. And what happened last time? Let's see. So they were already running away from the alien race Throgs, who are conquerors and colonists. that sort of deal. So they were running away, and it is Shanlanti and Thorvald. Yes, Thorvald. And Shanlanti is a lowly space crew member who really only got onto the ship because he was like cleaning cages and cleaning the ship, like that sort of thing. Like he doesn't have any like scientific or survival or military anything. And so he has the friendship of two Wolverines, and that's about it. And then Thorvald came from, like, he is a rank. So I don't know if it was mentioned like what his role is, like if he's a scientist or if he's like a big guns type of guy. I don't really know. But they've both had dreams. One of them, Shanlanti, has dreamed of a skull mountain, and the other one, Thorvald, has dreamed of this cavern that has like a green veil over it. So as they're leaving, they also have this disc. Thorvald found this disc, and it has like a weird, like electric magnetic something. And Thorvald was like weirdly possessed when he picked it up and was like, we need to go this way. So they go towards this island. They spend a couple days there just trying to find native people because they are both convinced that there are, you know, people, some sort of species that lives here. And Shan wakes up one day and Thorvald is just gone. Like, has taken their little raft canoe thing and is paddling out, and Shan runs after him, and Thorvald like tries to like smack him in the head and to stop him, and he gets away. Shan goes back to the island, and Shan has been there for several days, and he's decided that he's going to build a raft to get off the island and someplace else. He builds a raft, and then he has a dream about building something very special for someone. And he wakes up, and instead of actually building something, he was destroying something in his dream. So he now thinks that the native folks are able to communicate through dreams. So he devised a trap. So he pretended that he was asleep, and he was getting images in his brain of what he was supposed to be doing. So he pretends that he is still sleeping or unconscious and is doing what like the visions are, and then he traps this alien. Yes, the dragon space babes. Yeah, so we trap a dragon space babe who can only communicate through like mental images. So there's no speech or anything like that, just like asking questions that way. And Shan has also learned that they mm, might not travel space wise, but have like star maps and everything like that. So he's answering questions, all of those sorts of things as we're talking. Bomber Boy, bleh, bleh, bleh. Bomber Boy, welcome in. Thank you so much for the follow. Hi, hi, Red Atlantis. You had the same thought about the squirrels that hang out your window. Yes. You're old enough to remember pants with the legs that were bigger than the waist. Yes. Yes. That's about the pants that I'm making too. Yeah. It's just like insane. Insane. Oh my gosh. Bomber Boy, thank you so much for the prime. Thank you, thank you. Okay, bye. Oh yes, Dragon Space Babes. Yes. Ah, yes. It wouldn't be an old sci-fi pulpy book without some space babes. And we found them. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Okay, very good. Enjoy the lurk. All right, chapter 12. The Veil of Illusion. Perhaps his status was that of a prisoner, but Shan was too tired to press for an explanation. He was content to be left alone in the unusual, circular, but roofless room of the structure to which they had brought him. There was a thick, mat-like pallet in one corner, short for the length of his body, but softer than any bed he had rested on since he had left the Terran camp before the coming of the Throgs. Above him glimmered those patches of light symbolizing the lost stars. He blinked at them until they all ran together in bands like the jeweled coils on Warlockian bodies. Then he slept, dreamlessly. Yes, the Dragony Space Babes are like scaled, like shimmery scales, and they have like designs on them, like swirly, intricate designs. The Terran woke up, the Terran being Shan, with all his senses alert. Some silent alarm might have triggered that instant awareness of himself and his surroundings. There had been no change in the star pattern still overhead. No one had entered the round chamber. Shan rolled over on his mat bed, conscious that all his aches had vanished. Just as his mind was clearly active, so did his body also respond effortlessly to his demands. He was not aware of any hunger or thirst, though a considerable length of time must have passed since he had made his mysteriously contrived exit from the outer world. In spite of the humidity of the air, his ragged garments had dried on his body. Shan got to his feet, trying to order the sorry remnants of his uniform, eager to be on the move. Though to where and for what purpose he could not have answered. The door through which he had entered remained closed, refusing to yield to his push. Shan stepped back, eyeing the distance to the top of the partition between the roofless rooms. The walls were smooth with the gloss of a seashell's interior, but the exuberant confidence which had been with him since his awakening refused to accept such a minor obstacle. He made 2 test leaps, both times his fingers striking the wall well below the top of the partition. Shan gathered himself together as might a cat, and tried the 3rd time, putting into that effort every last ounce of strength, determination, and will. He made it, though his arms jerked as the weight of his body hung from his hands. Then a scramble, a knee hooked over the top, and he was perched on the wall, able to study the rest of the building. In shape, the structure was unlike anything he had seen on his homeworld or produced in any of the Tri-D records of survey accessible to him. The rooms were either circular or oval, each separated from the next by a short passage, so that the overall impression was that of 10 strings of beads radiating from a central knot of one large chamber, all with the uniform nacre walls and a limited amount of furnishings. As he balanced on the narrow perch, Shan could sight no other movement in the nearest line of rooms, those connected by corridors with his own. He got to his feet, to walk the tightrope of the upper walls toward the inner chamber, which was the heart of the Warlockian palace? Town? Apartment dwelling? At least it was the only structure on the island, for he could see the outer rim of that smooth, soft sand ringing it about. The island itself was curiously symmetrical, a perfect oval, too perfect to be a natural outcrop of sand and rock. There was no day or night here in the cavern. The light from the roof patches remained constantly the same, and that flow was abetted within the building by a soft radiation from the walls. Shan reached the next room in line, hunkering down to see within it. Warlock. Yes. W. To all appearances, the chamber was exactly the same as the one he had just left. There were the same unadorned walls, a thick mat bed against the far side, and no indication whether it was in use or had not been entered for days. He was on the next section of corridor wall when he caught that faint taint in the air, the very familiar scent of wolverines. Now it provided Shan with a guide as well as a promise of allies. The next bead room gave him what he wanted. Below him, Taggy and Togi paced back and forth. They had already torn to bits the sleeping mat, which had been the chamber's single furnishing, and their temper was none too certain. As Shan squatted well above their range of vision, Taggy reared against the opposite wall, his claws finding no hold on the smooth coating of its surface. They were as completely imprisoned as if they had been dropped into a huge fishbowl, and they were not taking to it kindly. How had the animals been brought here? Down that water tunnel by the same unknown method he himself had been transported until almost disastrous awakening in the center of the flood. The Terran did not doubt that the doors of the room were as securely fastened as those of his own further down the corridor. For the moment, the Wolverines were safe. He could not free them. And he was growing increasingly certain that if he found any of his native jailers, it would be at the center of that wheel of rooms and corridors. Shan made no attempt to attract the animals' attention, but kept on along his tightrope path. He passed 2 more rooms, both empty, both differing in no way from those he had already inspected. And then he came to the central chamber, 4 times as big as any of the rest and with a much brighter wall light. The Terran crouched, one hand on the surface of the partition top as an additional balance, the other gripping his stunner. For some reason, his captors had not disarmed him. Perhaps they believed they had no necessity to fear his off-world weapon. "Have you grown wings?" The words formed in his brain, bringing with them a sense of calm amusement to reduce all his bold exploration to the level of a child's first staggering steps. Shan fought his first answering flare of pure irritation. To lose even a fraction of control was to open a door for them. He remained where he was, as if he had never heard that question, surveying the room below with all the impassiveness he could summon. Here the walls were no smooth barrier, but honeycombed with niches in a regular pattern, and in each of the niches rested a polished skull, a non-human skull. Only the outlines of those ranked bones were familiar, for just so had looked the great purple-red rock where the wheeling flyers issued from the eye sockets. A rock island had been fashioned into a skull, by design or nature. And upon closer observation, the Terran could see that there was a difference among these ranked skulls, a mutation of coloring from row to row, a softening of outline, perhaps by the wearing of time. There was also a table of dull black rising from the flooring on legs which were not more than a very few inches high, so that from his present perch the board appeared to rest on the pavement itself. Behind the table in a row, as shopkeepers might await a customer, 3 of the Warlockians seated cross-legged on mats, their hands folded primly before them, and at the side a 4th, the one whom he had trapped on the island. Not one of those spiked heads rose to view him, but they knew that he was there. Perhaps they had known the very instant he had left the room or cell in which they had shut him, and they were so very sure of themselves. Once again, Shan subdued a spark of anger. That same patience with its core of stubborn determination which had brought him to Warlock backed his moves now. The Terran swung down, landing lightly on his feet, facing the 3 behind the table, towering well over them as he stood erect, yet gaining no sense of satisfaction from that merely physical fact. "You have come." The words sounded as if they might be a part of some polite formula, so he replied in kind and aloud, "Hey, Spears, welcome in. Hello, hello. How's it going?" "I have come." Without waiting for their bidding, he dropped into the same cross-legged pose, fronting them now on a more equal level across their dead black table. "And why have you come, Star Voyager?" That thought seemed to be a concentrated effort from all 3 rather than any individual questioning. "And why did you bring me?" He hesitated, trying to think of some polite form of address. Those he knew which were appropriate to their sex on their worlds seemed incongruous when applied to the bizarre figures now facing him. Wise ones, he finally chose. Those unblinking yellow eyes conveyed no emotion. Certainly, his human gaze could detect no change of expression on their non-human faces. You are male. I am, he agreed, not seeing just what that fact had to do with either diplomatic fencing or his experiences of the immediate past. Where is your thought guider? Shan puzzled over that conception, guessing at its meaning. I am my own thought guider, he returned stoutly, with all the conviction he could manage to put into that reply. Again, he met a yellow-green stare, but he sensed a change in them. Some of their complacency had ebbed. His reply had been as a stone dropped into a quiet pool, sending ripples out afar to disturb the customary mirror surface of smooth serenity. The Starborn One speaks the truth. That came from the Warlockian who had been his first contact. It would appear that he does. The agreement was measured, and Shan knew that he was meant to overhear that. It would seem, readers of the rods, the middle of the triumvirate. I have not had to say that word out loud before. At the table spoke now. All that living things do not follow our pattern of life, but that is possible. A male who thinks for himself, unguided, who dreams, perhaps, or who can understand the truth of dreaming. Strange indeed must be his people. Sharers of my visions, let us consult the old ones concerning this. For the first time, one of those crested heads moved. The gaze shifted from Shan to the ranks of the skulls, pausing at one. Oh, thank you, Noodles. Shan, ready for any wonder, did not betray his amazement when the ivory inhabitant of that particular niche moved, lifted from its small compartment, and drifted buoyantly through the air to settle at the right-hand corner of the table. Only when it had safely grounded did the eyes of the Warlockian move to another niche on the other side of the curving room, this time bringing up from close to floor level a time-darkened skull to occupy the left corner of the table. There was a third shifting from the weird storehouse, a last skull to place between the other two, and now the youngest native arose from her mat to bring a bowl of green crystal. One of her seniors took it in both hands, making a gesture of offering it to all three skulls, and then gazed over its rim at the Terran. We shall cast the rods, man who thinks without a guide. Perhaps then we shall see how strong your dreams are, to be bent to your using, or to break you for your impudence. Her hands swayed the bowl from side to side, and there was an answering whisper from its interior, as if the contents slid loosely there. Then one of her companions reached forward and gave a quick tap to the bottom of that container, spilling out upon the table a shower of brightly covered slivers, each an inch or so long. Shan, staring at the display in bewilderment, saw that in spite of the seeming carelessness of that toss, the small needles had spread out on the blank surface to form a design in arrangement and color, and he wondered how that skillful trick had been accomplished. All three of the Warlockians bent their heads to study the groupings of the tiny sticks, their young subordinate leaning forward also, her eagerness less well controlled than her elders. And now it was as if a curtain had fallen between the Terran and the aliens, all sense of communication which had been with him since he had entered the skull-lined chamber was summarily cut off. A hand moved, making the jeweled pattern, braceleting wrist, and extending up the arm. Flash subdued fire. Fingers swept the sticks back into the bowl. 4 pairs of yellow eyes raised to regard Shan once more, but the blanket of their withdrawal still held. The youngest Warlockian took the bowl from the elder who held it, stood for a long moment with it resting between her palms, fixing Shan with an unreadable stare. Then she came toward him. One of those at the table put out a restraining hand. Wadsworth, thank you so much for contributing to Sunday's stream. This time, Shan did not master his start as he heard the first audible voice, which had not been his own. The skull at the left hand on the table, by its yellowed color the oldest of those summoned from the niches, was moving because its jaws gaped and then snapped, emitting a faint bleat which might have been a word or two. She who would have halted the young Warlockian's advance withdrew her hand. Then her fingers curled in an unmistakable beckoning gesture. Thank you so much for the follow. Hello. Welcome in. I'm totally going to butcher your name, so apologies. I I will not say it for fear of offending, but welcome in. So glad you're here. The skull at the the skull at the left hand of the table, by its yellowed color, the oldest of those summoned from the niches, was moving because its jaws gaped and then snapped, emitting a faint bleat which might have been a word or two. She who would have halted the young Warlockian's advance withdrew her hand. Then her fingers curled in an unmistakable beckoning gesture. Shan came to the table, but he could not quite force himself near that chattering skull, even though it had stopped its jig of speech. The bowl of sticks was offered to him. Still, no message from mind to mind, but he could guess at what they wanted of him. The crystal substance was not cool to the touch, as he had expected. Rather, it was warm, as living flesh might feel. And the colored sticks filled about 2/3 of the interior, lying all mixed together without any order. Shan concentrated on recalling the ceremony the Warlockian had used before the first toss. She had offered the bowl to the skulls in return. The skulls. But he was no consulter of skulls. Still, holding the bowl close to his chest, Shan looked up over the roofless walls at the star map on the roof of the cavern. There, that was Rama. And to its left, just a little above, was Tyr's system, where swung the stark world of his birth, and of which he had only a few good memories, but of which he was a part. The Terran raised the bowl to that spot of light which marked Tyr's pale sun. Smiling with a wry twist, he lowered the bowl. On an impulse of pure defiance, he offered it to the skull that had chattered. Immediately, he realized that the move had had an electric effect upon the aliens. Slowly, at first, and then faster, he began to swing the bowl from side to side, the needles slipping, mixing within, and as he swung it, Shan held it out over the expanse of the table. The Warlockian who had given him the bowl was the one who struck it on the bottom, causing a rain of splinters. To Shan's astonishment, mixed as they had been in the container, they once more formed a pattern, and not the same pattern the Warlockians had consulted earlier. The dampening curtain between them vanished. He was in touch, mind to mind once again. So be it. The center Warlockian spread out her four-fingered, thumbless hand above the scattered needles. What is red is red. Again, a formula. He caught a chorus of answers from the others. What is red is red. To the dreamer, the dream. Let the dream be known for what it is, and there is life. Let the dream encompass the dreamer falsely, and all is lost. Who can question the wisdom of the old ones? Asked their leader. We are those who read the messages they send out of their mercy. This is a strange thing they bid us do, man. Open for you our own initiate's roads to the veil of illusion. That way has never been for males, who dream without set purpose, and have not the ability to know true from false, have not the courage to face their dreams to the truth. Do so, if you can. There was a flash of mockery in that, combined with something else, stronger than distaste, not as strong as hatred, but certainly not friendly. She held out her hands, and Shan saw now, lying on a slowly closing palm, a disc, such as the one Thorvald had shown him. The Terran had only one moment of fear, and then came blackness, more absolute than the dark of any night he had ever known. Light once more. Green light with an odd, shimmering quality to it. The skull-lined walls were gone. There were no walls. No building held him. Shan strolled forward, and his boots sank in sand, that smooth, satin sand which had ringed the island in the cavern. But he was certain he was no longer on that island, even within that cavern, though far above him there was still a dome of roof. The source of the green shimmer lay to his left. Somehow he found himself reluctant to turn and face it. That would commit him to action. But Shan turned. A veil of rippling green. Material? No, rather mist or light. A veil depending from some source so far over his head that its origin was hidden in the upper gloom. A veil which was a barrier he must cross. With every nerve protesting, Shan walked forward, unable to keep back. He flung up his arm to protect his face as he marched into that stuff. It was warm, and the gas, if gas it was, left no slick of moisture on his skin in spite of its foggy consistency. And it was no veil or curtain, for although he was already well into the murk, he saw no end to it. Blindly he trudged on, unable to sight anything but the rolling billows of green, pausing now and again to go down on one knee and pat the sand underfoot, reassured at the reality of that footing. And when he met nothing menacing, Shan began to relax. His heart no longer labored. He made no move to draw the stunner or knife. Where he was and for what purpose, he had no idea. But there was a purpose in this, and that the Warlockians were behind it, he did not doubt. The Initiate's Road, the leader had said, and the conviction was steady in his mind that he faced some test of alien devising. A cavern with a green veil, his memory awoke. Thorvald's dream. Shan paused, trying to remember how the other had described this place. He was so he was enacting Thorvald's dream. And could the survey officer now be caught in Shan's dream in turn, climbing up somewhere into the nose slit of a skull-shaped mountain? Green fog without end, and Shan lost in it. How long had he been here? Shan tried to reckon time, the time since his coming into the water world of the starred cavern. He realized that he had not eaten, nor drank, nor desired to do so either. Nor did he now. Yet he was not weak. In fact, he had never felt such tireless energy as possessed his spare body. Was this all a dream? His threatened drowning in the underground stream a nightmare? Yet there was a pattern in this, just as there had been a pattern in the needles he had spilled across the table. One even led to another with discernible logic. Because he had tossed that particular pattern, he had come here. According to the ambiguous instructions or warnings of the Warlockian witch, his safety in this place would depend upon his ability to tell true dreams from false. But how? Why? So far, he had done nothing except walk through a green fog, and for all he knew, he might well be traveling in circles. Because there was nothing else to do, Shan walked on, his boots pressing sand, rising from each step with a small, sucking sound. Then, as he stooped to search for some indication of a path or road which might guide him, his ears caught the slightest of noises, other small, sucking whispers. And he was not the only wayfarer in this place. End of chapter 12. Cool. Cool. So I love the slight of the Dragon Space Babes of being like, but you're a dude. Can you like be competent? I don't know. I love that. And then, like, giving him this test is pretty cool. The culture and the lore is interesting. We'll see. We'll see. Hmm. It is making more sense now. Yeah, things are starting to come together, which is nice. I like that at least some of the questions are being answered. I'm totally cool with a lot of questions in books, but I would like some answers before getting a boatload more. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, I of course have more questions that hopped into this dream sequence, but I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued. So let's just keep going. Chapter 13. He Who Dreams. We're 61% of the way through. The mist was not a quiet thing. It billowed and curled until it appeared to half conceal darker shadows, any one of which could be an enemy. Shan remained hunkered on the sand, every sense abnormally alert, watching the fog. He was still sure he could hear sounds which marked the progress of another. What other? One of the Warlockians tracking him to spy? Or was there some prisoner, like himself, lost out there in the murk? Could it be Thorvald? Now the sound had ceased. He was not even sure from what direction it had first come. Perhaps that other was listening now, as intent upon locating him. Shan ran his tongue over his dry lips. The impulse to call out, to try and contact any fellow traveler here, was strong. Only hard-learned caution kept him silent. He got to his hands and knees, uncertain as to his previous direction. Shan crept. Someone expecting a man walking erect might be suitably distracted by the arrival of a half-seen figure on all fours. He halted again to listen. He had been right. The sound of a very muffled footfall, or footfalls, carried to his ears. He was sure that the sound was louder, that the unknown was approaching. Shan stood, his hand close to his stunner. He was almost tempted to spray that beam blindly before him, hoping to hit the unseen by chance. A shadow, something more swift than a shadow, more than one of the tricks the curling fog played on his eyes, was moving with purpose, and straight for him. Still, prudence restrained Shan from calling out. The figure grew clearer. A Terran. It could be Thorvald. But remembering how they had last parted, Shan did not hurry to meet him. The shadow shape stretched out a long arm in a sweep, as if to pull aside some of the vapor concealing them from each other. Then Shan shivered, as if that fog had suddenly turned into the drive of frigid snow. For the mist did not roll back so that the two of them stood in an irregular clearing in the mist. And he did not front Thorvald. Shan was caught up in the ice grip of an old fear, frozen by it, but somehow clinging to a hope that he did not see the unbelievable. Those hands drawing the lash of a whip back into striking readiness, a brutal nose broken askew, a blaster burn puckering across cheek to misshapen ear, that evil, gloating grin of anticipation. Flick, flick, the slight dance of a lash in a master's hand as those thick fingers tightened about the stock of the whip. In a moment, it would whirl up to lay a ribbon of fire across Shan's defenseless shoulders. Then, Logali would laugh and laugh, his sadistic mirth echoed by those other men who played jackals in his rogue lion. Other men. Shan shook his head dazedly. But he did not stand again in the dump-size bar of the big strike. And he was no longer a terrorized youngster, fit meat for Logali's amusement. Only the whip rose, the lash curled out, catching Shan just as it had that time years ago, delivering a red slash of pure agony. But Logally was dead. Shan's mind screamed, fighting frantically against the evidence of his eyes, but that pain in his chest and shoulder. The dump bully had been spaced by off-world miners, now also dead, whose claim he had tried to jump out into the Ajax system. Logally drew back his lash, preparing to strike again. Shan faced a man 5 years dead who walked and fought. Or, Shan bit hard upon his lower lip, holding desperately to sane reasoning. Did he indeed face anything? Logally was the ancient devil of his boyhood, produced anew by the witchery of Warlock. Or had Shan himself been led to recreate both the man and the circumstances of their first meeting with fear as a weapon to pull the creator down? Dream true or false? Logally was dead. Therefore, this dream was false. It had to be. The Terran began to walk toward that grinning ogre rising out of his old nightmares. His hand was no longer on the butt of his stunner, but swung loosely at his side. He saw the coming lash, the wicked promise in those small, narrowed eyes. This was Logally at the acme of his strength, when he was most to be feared, as he had continued to exist over the years in the depths of a boy child's memory. But Logally was not alive. Only in a dream could he be. For the second time the lash bit at Shan, curling about his body to dissolve. There was no alteration in Logally's grin. His muscular arm drew back as he aimed a third blow. Shan continued to walk forward, bringing up one hand, not to strike at that sweating, bristly jaw, but as if to push the other out of his path. And in his mind he held one thought. This was not Logally. It could not be. 10 years had passed since they had met, and for 5 of those years Logally had been dead. Here was Warlockian witchery, to be met by sane Terran reasoning. Shan was alone. The mist, which had formed walls, enclosed him again, but still there was a smarting brand across his shoulder. Shan drew aside the rags of his uniform blouse to discover a welt, raw and red, and seeing that, his unbelief was shaken. When he had believed in Logally and in Logally's weapon, the other had had reality enough to strike that blow, make the lash cut deep. But when the Terran had faced the phantom with the truth, then neither Logally nor his lash existed. Shan shivered, trying not to think what might lie before him. Visions out of nightmares which could put on substance. He had dreamed of Logally in the past many times, and he had had other dreams just as frightening. Must he front those nightmares? All of them? Why? To amuse his captors, or to prove their contention that he was a fool to challenge the powers of such mistresses of illusion? How did they know just what dreams to use in order to break him? Or did he himself furnish the actors and the action, projecting old terrors in this mist as a tri-D tape projected a story in 3 dimensions for the amusement of the viewer? Dream true. Was this progress through the mist also a dream? Dreams within dreams. Shan put his hand to his head, uncertain, badly shaken. But that stubborn core of determination within him was still holding. Next time, he would be prepared at once to face down any resurrected memory. Walking slowly, pausing to listen for the slightest sound which might herald the coming of a new illusion, Shan tried to guess which of his nightmares might come to face him. But he was to learn that there was more than one kind of dream. Steeled against old fears, he was met by another emotion altogether. There was a fluttering in the air, a little crooning cry which pulled at his heart. Without any conscious thought, Shan held out his hands, whistling on 2 notes, a call which his lips appeared to remember more quickly than his mind. The shape which winged through the fog came straight to his waiting hold, tore at long-walled away heart with its once familiar beauty. It flew with a list. One of the delicately tinted wings was injured, had never healed straight. But the seraph nestled into the hollow of Shan's 2 palms and looked up at him with all the old liquid trust. Trav. Trav. He cradled the tiny creature carefully, regarded with joy its feathered body, the curled plumes on its proudly held head, felt the silken padding of those infinitesimal claws against his protecting fingers. Shan sat down in the sand, hardly daring to breathe. Trav. Again. The wonder of this never-to-be-hoped-for return filled him with a surge of happiness almost too great to bear, which hurt, in its way, with as great a pain as Logali's lash. It was a pain rooted in love, not fear and hate. Logali's lash. Shan trembled. Trav raised one of those small claws toward the Terran's face, crooning a soft, caressing cry for recognition, for protection, trying to be a part of Shan's life once more. Trav. How could he bear to will Trav into nothingness, to bear to summon up another harsh memory which would sweep Trav away? Trav was the only thing Shan had ever known which he could love wholeheartedly, that had answered his love with a return gift of affection so much greater than the light body he now held. Trav, he whispered softly. Then he made his great effort against this second and far more subtle attack. With the same agony which he had known years earlier, he resolutely summoned a bitter memory, sat nursing once more a broken thing which died in pain he could not ease, aware himself of every moment of that pain. And what was worse, this time there clung that nagging little doubt. What if he had not forced the memory? Perhaps he could have taken Trav with him unhurt, alive, at least for a while. Shan covered his face with his now empty hands. To see a nightmare flicker out after facing squarely up to its terror, that was no great task. To give up a dream which was part of a lost heaven that cut cruelly deep. The Terran dragged himself to his feet, drained and weary, stumbling on. Was there no end to this aimless circling through a world of green smoke? He shambled ahead, moving his feet ladenly. How long had he been here? There was no division in time, just the unchanging light, which was a part of the fog through which he plodded. Then he heard more than any shuffle of foot across sand, any crooning of a long, dead seraph, the rising and falling of a voice, a human voice, not quite singing or reciting, but something between the two. Shan paused, searching his memory, a memory which seemed bruised, for the proper answer to match that sound. But, though he recalled scene after scene out of the years, that voice did not trigger any return from his past. He turned towards its source, duly determined to get over quickly the meeting which lay behind that signal. Only, though he walked on, Shan did not appear any closer to the man behind the voice, nor was he able to make out separate words composing that chant, a chant broken now and then by pauses, so that the Terran grew aware of the distress of his fellow prisoner. For the impression that he sought another captive came out of nowhere and grew as he cast wider and wider in his quest. Then he might have turned some invisible corner in the mist, for the chant broke out anew in stronger volume, and now he was able to distinguish words he knew. Where blow the winds between the worlds, and hang the suns in dark of space, for power is given a man to use, let him do so well before the last accounting. The voice was hoarse, cracked, the words spaced with uneven catches of breath, as if they had been repeated many, many times to provide an anchor against madness, form a tie to reality. And hearing that note, Shan slowed his pace. This was out of no memory of his. He was sure of that. Blow the winds between the worlds, and hang the suns of dark... of... That harsh croak of voice was running down, as a clock runs down for lack of winding. Shan sped on, reacting to a plea which did not lay in the words themselves. Once more the mist curled back, provided him with an open space. A man sat on the sand, his fist buried wrist-deep in the smooth grains on either side of his body, his eyes set, red-rimmed, glazed, his body rocking back and forth in time to his labored chant. The dark of space. "Thorvald!" Shan skidded in the sand, went down on his knees. The manner of their last parting was forgotten as he took in the officer's condition. The other did not stop his swaying, but his head turned with a stiff jerk, the gray eyes making a visible effort to focus on Shan. Then some of the strain smoothed out of the gaunt features, and Thorvald laughed softly. "Garth." "Oh, thanks for the first chat. Hello." That was supposed to be a heart, but, Shan stiffened, but had no chance to protest that mistaken identification as the other continued. "So you made Class 1 status, boy. I always knew you could if you worked for it. A couple of black marks on your record, sure, but those can be rubbed out, boy, when you're willing to try. Thorvald always had been survey. Our father could have been proud." Thorvald's voice flattened. His smile faded. There was a growing spark of some emotion in those gray eyes. Unexpectedly, he hurled himself forward, his hands clawing for Shan's throat. He bore the younger man down under him to the sand, where Lanty found himself fighting desperately for his life against a man who could only be mad. A little mangled, but still good. Shan used a trick learned on the dumps, and his opponent doubled up with a gasp of agony to let the younger man break free. He planted a knee on the small of Thorvald's back, digging the officer into the sand, pinning down his arms in spite of the other's struggles. Regaining his own breath in gulps, Shan tried to appeal to some spark of reason in the other. "Thorvald, this is Lanty. Lanty!" His name echoed in the mist wall void like an inhuman wail. "Lanty? No, Throg. Lanty. Throg. Killed my brother." Sand puffed out with the breath which expelled that indictment. But Thorvald no longer fought, and Shan believed him close to collapse. Shan relaxed his hold, rolling the other man over. Thorvald obeyed, his pull limply, lying face upward, sand in his hair and eyebrows, crusting his slack lips. The younger man brushed the dirt away gently as the other opened his eyes to regard Shan with his old, impersonal stare. "You're alive," Thorvald stated bleakly. "Garth's dead. You ought to be dead, too." Shan drew back, rubbed sand from his hands, his concern dampened by the other's patent hostility. Only that angry accusation vanished in a blink of those gray eyes. Then there was a warmer recognition in Thorvald's expression. "Lanty!" The younger man might just have come into sight. "What are you doing here?" Shan tightened his belt. "Just about what you are." He was still aloof, giving no acknowledgement of difference in rank now. "Running around in this fog, hunting the way out." Thorvald sat up, surveying the billowing walls of the hole which contained them. Then he reached out a hand to draw fingers down Shan's forearm. "You are real," he observed simply, and his voice was warm, welcoming. "Don't bet on it," Shan snapped. "The unreal can be mighty real, here." His hand went up to the smarting brand on his shoulder. Thorvald nodded. "Masters of illusion," he murmured. Mistresses, Shan corrected. This place is run by a gang of pretty smart witches. Witches? You've seen them? Where? And what? Who are they? Thorvald pounced with a return of his old-time sharpness. They're females, right enough, and they can make the impossible happen. I'd say that classifies them as witches. One of them tried to take me over back on the island. I set a trap and caught her. Then, somehow, she transported me. Swiftly, he outlined the chain of events leading from his sudden awakening in the river tunnel to his present penetration in this fog world. Thorvald listened eagerly. When the story was finished, he rubbed his hands across his drawn face, smearing away the last of the sand. And you have some idea of who they are, and a suggestion of how you got here? I don't remember that much of my own arrival. As far as I can remember, I went to sleep on the island and woke up here. Shan studied him and knew that Thorvald was telling the truth. He could remember nothing of his departure on the outrigger, the way he had fought Shan in the lagoon. The survey officer must have been under the control of the Warlockians then. Quickly, he gave the older man his version of the other's action in the outer world, and Thorvald was clearly astounded, though he did not question the facts Shan presented. They just took me, Thorvald said in a husky half-whisper. But why? And why are we here? In this prison? Or no, is this a prison? Shan shook his head. I think all this, a wave of his hand encompassed the green wall, what lay beyond it and in it, is a test of some kind. This dream business. A little while ago, I got to thinking that I wasn't here at all, that I might be dreaming it all. Then I met you. Thorvald understood. Yes, but this could be a dream meeting. How can we tell? He hesitated, almost diffidently, before he added, Have you met anyone else here? Yes. Cheyenne had no desire to go into that. People out of your past life? Yes. Again, he did not elaborate. So did I. Thorvald's expression was bleak. His encounters in the fog must have proved no more pleasant than Shan's. That suggests that we do trigger the hallucinations ourselves. But maybe we can really lick it now. Hey Star, welcome in. Hello, hello. Thank you for contributing to Sunday's stream and giving little bean treats. How kind. How? Well, if these phantoms are born of our memories, there are about only 2 or 3 we could see together. Maybe a Throg on the rampage, or that hound we left back in the mountains. And if we do sight anything like that, we'll know what it is. On the other hand, if we stick together and one of us sees something that the other can't, well, that fact alone will explode the ghost. There was sense in what he said. Shan aided the officer to his feet. I must be a better subject for their experiments than you, the older man remarked ruefully. They took me over completely at the first. You were carrying that disc, Shan pointed out. Maybe that acted as a focusing lens for whatever power they used to make us play trained animals. Could be. Thorvald brought out the cloth-wrapped bone coin. I still have it. But he made no move to pull off the bit of rag about it. Now, he gazed at the wall of green. Which way? Shan shrugged. Long ago, he had lost any idea of keeping a straight course through the murk. He might have turned around any number of times since he first walked blindly into this place. Then he pointed to the packet Thorvald held. Why not flip that? He asked. Heads, we go that way. He indicated the direction in which they were facing. Tails, we do a right-about face. There was an answering grin on Thorvald's lips. As good a guide as any we're likely to find here. We'll do it. He pulled away the twist of cloth, and with a swift snap, reminiscent of that used by the Warlockian witch to empty the bowl of sticks, He tossed the disc into the air. It spun, whirled, but, to their open-jawed amazement, it did not fall in the sand. Instead, it spun until it looked like a small globe instead of a disc, and it lost its dead white for a glow of green. Then that glow became dazzling for Terran eyes. The miniature sun swung out, not in orbit, but in straight line of flight, heading to their right. With a muffled cry, Thorvald started in pursuit, Shan running beside him. They were in a tunnel of the fog now, and the pace set by the spinning coin was swift. The Terrans continued to follow it at the best pace they could summon, having no idea of where they were headed, but each with the hope that they finally did have a guide to lead them through this place of confusion and into a sane world where they could face on more equal terms those who had sent them there. Well, this is convenient. Yeah, it is. I'm kind of hoping that the disc leads them um into danger. That's I mean, that's what I'm hoping. It would make a better story if that was the case. Well, maybe not a better story. An interesting story instead of like a manner of convenience. It would be very anticlimactic, especially since like they don't know what it is, they don't really know what it does. Like, can we figure that out first before they're just saved? Yeah. And it's also interesting that they both came across each other. I don't know. I just find that interesting. Maybe it's because they're both like in the same like dream like state and they have the connection of being on the same planet and have gone through the same trials with the Throgs. But I do find that interesting that they were able to find each other. It could also just be that like that is what Shan was trying to do, was to figure out where Thorvald was, and so like his subconscious just like found him, like searching sort of, kind of like in Stranger Things when Eleven can like find them through like radio waves or airwaves or whatever. I'm wondering if that's it. Perhaps the space they're in isn't that big. It's just confusing with all the fog. That could be too. Yeah, that could be. Yeah, because like if you can't see and you don't even know if you're going in a straight line. Yeah, for sure, for sure. And we totally called that he was you don't trust Thorvald at all. Interesting. Did you trust him before, like when they first met? Or is this just like green fog Thorvald that oh you didn't either? Okay, cool. Hey Red Talus, welcome in. Hello. Hi. Interesting, interesting. Yeah, I didn't trust him when we first met him either. And you trust him less now. I love that. I love it. I also did not trust Thorvald when we first met him. Just because it seemed convenient that he happened to also survive. But we'll see, we'll see. He gives off "this man is gonna strangle you" vibes. Am I late? You are right on time. You're never late, Red Talus. The party is just starting. Let's see. What have we read so far? They Shan is like doing a test for the Dragon Space Babes to see like if he is able to control his dreams and stuff like that, like his visions. And he's just like lost in green fog, in like a green fog, and has relived through dreams two traumatizing experiences in his life. And then he found his travel buddy, his his companion Thorvald, who has also just been wandering through this like green foggy hazy place. You still feel like it's going heavy on the feminine witchery versus man logic. Yes, it is. It absolutely is. I feel that too, Falkor. Yeah. It would, and it wouldn't be so irksome if Shan every time he like was like this isn't real, like this isn't what's happening, if he wasn't like I need to use my logic and my facts, like it would be less annoying or less of an issue. You have an awful feeling that you have an idea how the book ends. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, if you're going to be upset, I hope that this ending doesn't happen. All right. Let's go. Let's do it. Chapter 14. Escape. We're 67% of the way through. Something's ahead. Thorvald did not slacken the pace set by the brilliant spot of green they trailed. Both of the Terrans feared to fall behind, to lose touch with that guide. Their belief that somehow the traveling disc would bring them to the end of the mist and its attendant illusions had grown firmer with every foot of ground they traversed. A dark, fixed point, now partly veiled by mist, lay beyond, and it was toward that looming half-shadow that the spinning disc hurtled. Now the mist curled away to display its bulk, larger, blacker, and 4 or 5 times Thorvald's height. Both men stopped short, for the disc no longer played Pathfinder. It still whirled on its axis in the air, faster and faster, until it appeared to be throwing off sparks, but the sparks faded against a monolith of dark rock, unlike the native stone they had seen elsewhere. For it was neither red nor warmly brown, but a dull, dead black. It could have been a huge stone slab, trimmed, smoothed, set up on end as a monument or marker, except that only infinite labor could have accomplished such a task, and there was no valid reason for such toil, as far as the Terrans could perceive. This is it. Thorvald moved closer. By the disc's action, they deduced that their guide had drawn them to this featureless black steel with the precision of a beam-controlled ship. However, the purpose still eluded them. They had hoped for some exit from the territory of the Vale, but now they faced a solid slab of dark stone, neither a conventional exit or entrance, as they proved by circling its base. Beneath their boots was the eternal sand, around them the fog. Now what? Shan asked. They had made their trip about the slab and were back again where the disc whirled with unceasing vigor in a shower of emerald sparks. Thorvald shook his head, scanning the rock face before them gloomily. The eagerness had gone out of his expression, a vast wariness replacing it. There must have been some purpose in coming here, he replied, but his tone had lost the assurance of earlier moments. Well, if we strike away from here, we'll just get right back in again. Shan waved a hand toward the mist, waiting as if with a hunter's watch upon them. And we certainly can't go down. He dug a boot toe into the sand to demonstrate the folly of that. So what about up? He ducked under the spinning disc to lay his hands against the surface of the giant slab, and in so doing he made a discovery, revealed in his touch although hidden from sight. For his fingers, running aimlessly across the cold, slightly uneven surface of the stone, slipped into a hollow. Quite a deep hollow. Excited, half fearing that his sudden guess might be wrong, Shan slid his hand higher in line with that hollow, to discover a second. The first had been level with his chest, the second, perhaps 18 inches or so above. He jumped, to draw his fingers down the rock with damage to his nails by getting his proof. You can tell that an American wrote this book because it's in inches. Just pointing that out. And somebody who is not like a scientist or mathematic. Yeah, then anytime like nail damage happens, it's uncomfortable. It's upsetting. There was a third niche, deep enough to hold more than just the toe of a boot, and a fourth above that. "We've a ladder of sorts here," he reported. Without waiting for any answer from Thorvald, Shen began to climb. The holds were so well matched in shape and size that he was sure they could not be natural. They had been born there for use. The use to which he was now putting them, a ladder to the top of the slab. Though what he might find there was beyond his power to imagine. The disk did not rise. Shan passed that core of light, climbing above it into the greater gloom. But the holes did not fail him. Each was waiting in a direct line with his companion. And to an active man the scramble was not difficult. He reached the summit, glanced around, and made a quick grab for a secure handhold. Waiting for him was no level platform, such as he had confidently expected to find. The surface up which he had just made his way fly fashion was the outer wall of a well or chimney. He looked down now into a pit where black nothingness began within a yard of the top, for the radiance of the mist did not penetrate far into that descent. Shan fought an attack of giddiness. It would be very easy to lose control, to tumble over and be swallowed up in what might well be a bottomless chasm. And what was the purpose of this well? Was it a trap to entice a prisoner into an unwary climb and then let gravity drag him over? The whole setup was meaningless. Perhaps meaningless only to him, Shan conceded, with a flash of level thinking. The situation could be quite different as far as the natives were concerned. This structure did have a reason, or it would never have been erected in the first place. "What's the matter?" Thorvald's voice was rough with impatience. "This thing's a well," Shan edged about a fraction to call back. "The inside is open and, as far as I can tell, goes clear to the planet's core." "Ladder on the inside, too?" Shan squirmed. That was, of course, a very obvious supposition. He kept a tight hold with his left hand, and with the other he did some exploring. Yes, here was a hollow right inside, twin to those on the outside, but to swing over that narrow edge of safety and begin a descent into the black of the well was far harder than any action he had taken since the morning the Throgs had raided the camp. The green mist could hold no terrors greater than those with which his imagination peopled the depths now waiting to engulf him. But Shan swung over, fitted his boot into the first hollow, and started down. The only encouragement he gained during that nightmare ordeal was that those holes were regularly spaced, but somehow his confidence did not feed on that fact. There always remained the nagging fear that when he searched for the next, it would not be there, and he would cling to his perch lacking the needful strength in aching arms and legs to reclimb the inside ladder. He was fast losing that sense of well-being which had been his during his travels through the fog. A fatigue tugged at his arms and weighed leaden on his shoulders. Mechanically, he prospected for the next hold, and then the next. Above, the oblong of half-light grew smaller and smaller, sometimes half blotted out by the movements of Thorvald's body as the other followed him down that interior way. How far was down? Shan giggled lightheadedly at the humor of that, or what seemed to be humor at the moment. He was certain that they were now below the level of sand floor outside the slab, and yet no end had come to the well hollow. No break of light down here. He might have been sightless. But just as the blind develop an extra perceptive case But just as the blind develop an extra perspective sense of unseen obstacles, So did Shan now find that he was aware of a change in the nature of the space about him. His weary arms and legs held him against the solidity of a wall, yet the impression that there was no longer another wall at his back grew stronger with every niche which swung him downward. And he was as sure as he could see it that he was now in a wide open space, another cavern, perhaps, but this one totally dark. Deprived of light, he relied upon his ears, and there was a sound, faint, distorted perhaps by the acoustics of this place, but keeping up a continuous murmur. Water. Not the wash of waves with their persistent beat, but rather the rippling of a running stream. Water must lie below. And just as his weariness had grown with his leaving behind the fog, so now did both hunger and thirst gnaw at Shan, all the sharper for the delay. The Terran wanted to reach that water, could picture it in his mind, putting away the possibility, the probability, that it might be seaborne and salt, and so unfit to drink. The upper opening to the cavern of the fog was now so far above him that he had to strain to see it, and that warmth which had been there was gone. A dank chill wrapped him here, dampened the hold to which he clung until he was afraid of slipping, while the murmur of the water grew louder until its slap, slap sounded within arm's distance. His boot toe skidded from a niche. Shan fought to hold on with numbed fingers. The other foot went. He swung by his hands, kicking vainly to regain a measure of footing. Then his arms could no longer support him, and he cried out as he fell. Water closed about him with an icy shock, which for a moment paralyzed him. He flailed out, fighting the flood to get his head above the surface where he could gasp in precious gulps of water. There was a current here, a swiftly running one. Shan remembered the one which had carried him into the cavern in which the Warlockians had their strange dwelling. Although there were no clusters of crystals in this tunnel to supply him with light, the Terran began to nourish a faint hope that he was again in that same stream, that those light crystals would appear, and that he might eventually return to the starting point of this meaningless journey. So he strove only to keep his head above water. Hearing a splashing behind him, he called out, "Thorvald?" "Lanty?" The answer came back at once. The splashing grew louder as the other swam to catch up. Shan swallowed a mouthful of the water lapping against his chin. The taste was brackish, but not entirely salt, and though it stung his lips, the liquid relieved a measure of his thirst. Only no glowing crystals appeared to stud these walls, and Shan's hope that they were on their way to the cavern of the island faded. The current grew softer, and he had to fight to keep his head above water, his tired body reacting sluggishly to commands. The murmur of the racing flood drummed louder in his ears. Or was that sound the same? He could no longer be sure. Shan only knew that it was close to impossible to snatch the necessary breath as he was rolled over and over in the hurrying flood. In the end, he was ejected into blazing, blinding light, into a suffocation of wild water as the bullet in an ancient Terran rifle might have been fired at no specific target. Gasping, beaten, more than half drowned, Shan was pummeled by waves, literally driven up on a rocky surface which skinned his body cruelly. He lay there, his arms moving feebly until he contrived to raise himself in time to be wretchedly sick. Somehow he crawled on a few feet farther before he subsided again, blinded by the light, flinching from the heat of the rock on which he lay, but unable to do more for himself. His first coherent thought was that his speculation concerning the reality of this experience was at last resolved. This could not possibly be a hallucination. At least this particular sequence of events was not. and he was still hazily considering that when a hand fell on his shoulder, fingers biting into his raw flesh. Shan snarled, rolled over on his side. Thorvald, water dripping from his rags, or rather steaming from them, his shaggy hair plastered to his skull, sat there. "You all right?" Shan sat up, in turn, shielding his smarting eyes. He was bruised, battered badly enough, but he could claim no major injuries. "I think so. Where are we?" Thorvald's lips stretched across his teeth in what was more a grimace than a smile. "Right off the map. Any map I know. Take a look." They were on a scrap of beach which was more like a reef, for it lacked any covering comparable to sand except for some cupfuls of coarse gravel locked in rock depressions. Rocks, red as the rust of dried blood, rose in fantastic, water-sculptured shapes about the small, semi-level space they had somehow won. This space was V-shaped, washed by equal streams on either side of the prong of rock by water which spouted from the face of a sheer cliff not too far away, with force enough to spray several feet beyond its exit point. Shan, seeing that, and guessing at its significance, drew a deep breath, and heard the ghost of an answering chuckle from his companion. "Yes, that's where we came out, boy. Like to make a return trip?" Shan shook his head, and then wished that he had not so rashly made that move, for the world swung in a dizzy whirl. Things had happened too fast. For the moment, it was enough that they were out of the underground ways, back under the amber sky, feeling the bite of Warlock's sun. Steadying his head with both hands, Shan turned slowly to survey what might lie at their backs. The water, pouring by on either side, suggested that they were again on an island. Warlock, he thought gloomily, seemed to be for Terrans a succession of islands, all hard to escape. The tangle of rocks did not encourage any exploration, just gazing at them added to his weariness. They rose, tier by tier, to a ragged crown against the sky. Shan continued to sit staring at them. "To climb that," his voice trailed into the silence of complete discouragement. "You climb, or swim," Thorvald stated. But Shan noted. The survey officer was not in a hurry to make either move. Nowhere in that wilderness of rock was there the least relieving bit of purple foliage, nor did any clack-clacks or leather-headed birds tour the sky over their heads. Shan's thirst might have been partially assuaged, but his hunger remained, and it was that need which forced him at last into action. The barren heights promised nothing in the way of food, but remembering the harvest the wolverines had taken from under the rocks along the river, he got to his feet and lurched out on the reef which had been their salvation, hunting some pool which might hold an edible captive or two. So it was that Shan made the discovery of a possible path consisting of a ledge running toward the other end of the island, if this were an island where they had taken refuge. The spray of the water drenched that way, feeding small pools in the uneven surface, and strips of yellow weed trailed in slimy ribbons back below the surface of the waves. "I know, those little baby wolverines. I want them back." They were the true MVP. He called to Thorvald and gestured to his find, and then, close together, linking hands when the going became hazardous, the men followed the path. Twice they made finds in the pools, finned or clawed grotesque creatures, which they killed and ate, wolfing down the few fragments of odd-tasting flesh. Then, in a small crevice, which could hardly be dignified by the designation of cave, Thorvald chanced upon a quite exciting discovery, a clutch of 4 greenish eggs, each as large as his doubled fist. Gross. Their outer covering was more like tough membrane than true shell, and the Terrans worried it open with difficulty. Shan shut his eyes, trying not to think of what he mouthed as he sucked his share dry. At least that semi-liquid stayed put in his middle, though he expected disastrous results from the experiment. More than a little heartened by his piece of luck, they kept on, though the ledge changed from a reasonably level surface to a series of rising, unequal steps, drawing them away from the water. At long last, they came to the end of the path. Shan leaned back against a convenient spur of rock. It was not necessary, no. Mm-mm. Company, he alerted Thorvald. The survey officer joined him to share an outcrop of rock, from which they were provided with an excellent view of the scene below, and it was a scene to hold their full attention. That soft sweep of sand which had floored the cavern of the fog lay here also, a gray-blue carpet sloping gently out of the sea. For Shan had no doubt that the wide stretch of water before them was the Western Ocean, walling the beach on either side and extending well out into the water, so that the farthest piles were awash, except for their crowns, were pillars of stone, shaped with the same finish as that slab which had provided them a ladder of escape. And because of the regularity of their spacing, Shan did not believe them works of nature. Grouped between them now were the players of the drama. One of the Warlockian witches, her gem body patterns glittering in the sunlight, was walking backward out of the sea. Her hands held palms together, breast high, in a Terran attitude of prayer. And following her, something swam in the water, clearly not another of her own species, but her actions suggested that by some invisible means she was drawing that water-dweller after her. Waiting on shore were 2 others of her kind, viewing her actions with close attention, the attention of scholars for an instructor. Wyverns. Shan looked inquiringly at his companion. Thorvald added a whisper of explanation. A legend of Terra. They were supposed to have a snake's tail instead of hind legs, but the heads, they're wyverns. Wyverns. Shan liked the sound of that word. To his mind, it well fitted the Warlockian witches. Bookworm? Bookwyvern? Yes. And the one they were watching in action continued her steady backward retreat, rolling her bemused captive out of the water. What emerged into the blaze of sunlight was one of those fork-tailed sea-dwellers, such as the Terrans had seen die after the storm. The thing crawled out of the shallows, its eyes focused in a blind stare on the praying hands of the wyvern. She halted, well up on the sand, when the body of her victim or prisoner, Shan was certain that the forktail was one or the other, was completely out of the water. Then, with lightning speed, she dropped her hands. Instantly, Forktail came to life. Fanged jaws snapped. Aroused, the beast was the incarnation of evil rage, a rage which had a measure of intelligence to direct it into deadly action. And facing it, seemingly unarmed and defenseless, were the slender, fragile wyverns. Yet none of the small group of natives made any attempt to escape. Shan thought them suicidal in their indifference as Forktail, short legs, sending the fine sand flying in a dust cloud, made a rush toward its enemies. Oh, thank you so much for contributing to Sunday's stream, Falcor. The wyvern, who had held the beast ashore, did not move, but one of her companions swung up a hand, as if negligently waving the monster to a stop. Between her first 2 digits was a disc. Thorvald caught at Shan's arms. See that? It's a copy of the one I had. It must be. They were too far away to be sure it was a duplicate, but it was coin-shaped, and bone white. And now the wyvern swung it back and forth in a metronome sweep. Forktail skidded to a stop, its head beginning, reluctantly at first, and then with increasing speed, to echo that left-right sweep. This wyvern had the sea beast under control, even as her companion had earlier held it. Chance dictated what happened next, as had her sister Charmer. The wyvern began a backward withdrawal up the length of the beach, drawing the sea thing in her wake. They were very close to the foot of the drop above which the Terrans stood, fascinated, when the sand betrayed the witch. Her foot slipped into a hole, and she was thrown backward, her control disc spinning out of her fingers. At once the monster she had charmed shot forth its head, snapped at the spinning trifle, and swallowed it. Then the forktail, hunched in a posture Shan had seen the wolverines use when they were ready to spring. The weaponless wyvern was the prey, and both her companions were too far away to interfere. Why he moved he could not have explained. There was no reason for him to go to the aid of the Warlockian, one of the same breed who had ruled him against his will. But Shan sprang, landing in the sand on his hands and knees. The sea thing whipped around, undecided between two possible victims. Shan had his knife free, was on his feet, his eyes on the beast's, knowing that he had appointed himself Dragon Slayer for no good reason. End of chapter 14. The next chapter is called Dragon Slayer. Just leave the wyvern alone. Leave the dragon alone. It's done nothing wrong. It's just doing its thing. Just let the wyvern be. Maybe the wyvern just wants to be friends. You ever think of that, Shan? I'm sure you didn't. Best buds. Exactly. I would love to be best buds with a wyvern, let me tell you. Red Dallas, yes. Friends? Oof. All right. Chapter 15. We are 72% of the way through. Look at us go. Today I feel like we are just like powering through. Here we go. Dragon Slayer. I I am not a good, like, how am I trying to say this? So the first word is like a scream or a yell or like a war cry. I'm not quite sure. Uh but I'm not good at doing those unless it is like unfiltered, unbridled, where I can just like scream my little heart out. Side story. I went to a party that turned into a murder mystery, and I was one of the few people that knew that going there it was going to be a murder mystery party because I'm the one who started it. Like I was the part that like made the party actually start. And that was me pretending to have to go to the bathroom, and like my friend who was hosting the party was using the downstairs one, so like it was all set up that like I would go after she went and then be like, "Hey, like where's your other bathroom?" And she'd be like, "Oh, it's upstairs." And then I would like go upstairs, wait a few minutes, I would find the dead body, and then I would just like scream, like just like ear piercing scream, queen scream, and it was the best. I want that job. I heard that that's a job where you can just scream all day and they would just like capture your screams and put them into like movies and TV shows, and I would love to do that. I would love to explore the variety of screams. However, I'm not going to do that during an ASMR stream. I just feel like it's not fitting. A whispered stream. A whispered scream. And also, like, I think it is supposed to be like a war cry. Yeah, it totally is. Because it's like A, Y, and then like a bunch of E's. You could do that at a party with a couple drinks and me, not into the microphone. Right. And like the microphone is not that far away from me. Like, and it picks up sound pretty well. So I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna scream. Just imagine the most amazing war cry, rallying cry. And that's what I'm doing. Ready? Okay. Sheer defiance, not only of the beast he fronted, but of the wyverns as well, brought that old rallying cry to his lips, the call used on the dumps of Tyr to summon gang aid against outsiders. Forktail had crouched again for a spring, but that throat-crackling blast appeared to startle it. Shan, blade ready, took a dancing step to the right. The thing was scaled, perhaps as well armored against the frontal attack as was the shell creature he had fought with the aid of the wolverines. He wished he had the Terran animals now, with Taggy and his mate to tease and feint about the monster as they had done with the Throg hound, for he would have a better chance. If only the animals were here. We'll miss you, Taggy and Togi. Those eyes, red-pitted eyes and a gargoyle head followed his every movement. Perhaps those were the only vulnerable points. Muscles tensed beneath that scaled hide. The Terran readied himself for a sidewise leap, his knife hand raised to rake at those eyes. A brown shape with a V of lighter fur banding its back crossed the far range of Shan's vision. He could not believe what he saw. Not even with a snarling animal slavering with rage came at a lumbering gallop to stand beside him, a second animal on his heel. Uttering his own battle cry, Taggy attacked. The fork-tail's head swung, imitating the movements of the wolverine as it had earlier mimicked the swaying of the disc in the wyvern's hand. Togi came in from the other side. They might have been hounds keeping a bull in play. And never had they shown such perfect teamwork, almost as if they could sense what Shan desired of them. That forked tail lashed viciously, a formidable weapon. Bone, muscles, scaled flesh, half buried in the sand, swept up a cloud of grit into the face of the man and the animals. Shan fell back, pawing with his free hand at his eyes. The wolverines circled warily, trying for the attack they favored, the spring to the shoulders and the usual fatal assault on the spine behind his neck. But the armored head of the fork-tail, slung low, warned them off. Again the tail lashed, and this time Taggy was caught and hurled across the beach. Togi uttered a challenge, made a reckless dash, and raked down the length of the fork-tail's body, fastening on that tail, weighing it to earth with her own poundage, while the sea creature fought to dislodge her. Shan, his eyes watering from the sand, but able to see, watched that battle for a long second, judging that fork-tail was completely engaged in trying to free its best weapon from the grip of the wolverine. The latter clawed and bit with a fury which suggested Togi intended to immobilize that weapon by tearing it to shreds. Forktail wrenched its body, striving to reach its tormentor with fangs or clawed feet, and in that struggle to achieve an impossible position, its head slewed far about, uncovering the unprotected area behind the skull base, which usually lay under the spiny collar about its shoulders. Shan went in. With one hand he gripped the edge of that collar, its serrations tearing his flesh, and at the same time he drove his knife blade deep into the soft underfolds, ripping on toward the spinal column. The blade nicked against bone as the fork-tail's head slammed back, catching Shan's hand and knife together in a trap. The Terran was jerked from his feet and flung to one side with the force of the beast's reaction. Blood spurted up. His own blood mingled with that of the monster. Only Togi's riding of the tail prevented Shan's being beaten to death. The armored snout pointed skyward as the creature ground the sharp edge of its collar down on the Terran's arm. Shan, frantic with pain, drove his free fist into one of those eyes. Forktail jerked convulsively. Its head snapped down again, and Shan was free. The Terran threw himself back, keeping his feet with an effort. Forktail was writhing, churning up the sand in a cloud, but it could not rid itself of the knife Shan had planted with all his strength, and which the blows of its own armored collar were now driving deeper and deeper into its back. It howled thinly, with an abnormal shrilling. Shan, nursing his bleeding forearm against his chest, rolled free from the waves of sand it threw about, bringing up against one of the rock pillars. With that to steady him, he somehow found his feet and stood weaving, trying to see through the rain of dust. The convulsions which churned up that concealing cloud were growing more feeble. Then Shan heard the triumphant squall from Togi, saw her brown body still on the torn tail just above the forking. The wolverine used her claws to hitch her way up the spine of the sea monster, heading for the mountain of blood spouting from behind the head. Forktail fought to raise that head once more. Then the massive jaw thudded into the sand, teeth snapping fruitlessly as a flood of grit overrode the tongue, packed into the gaping mouth. How long had it taken, that frenzy of battle on the blood-stained beach? Shan could have set no limit in clock-ruled time. Time is but a social construct, people. That's what I've been saying for years. He pressed his wounded arm tighter to him, lurched past the still twitching sea thing to that splotch of brown fur on the sand, shaping the wolverine's whistle with dry lips. What is time? Togi was still busy with the kill, but Taggy lay where that murderous tail had thrown him. Shan fell on his knees as the beach around him developed a curious tendency to sway. He put his good hand to the ruffled back fur of the motionless wolverine. Taggy! A slight quiver answered. Shan tried awkwardly to raise the animal's head with his own hand. As far as he could see, there were no open wounds, but there might be broken bones, internal injuries he did not have the skill to heal. Taggy? He called again, gently, striving to bring that heavy head up on his knee. The furred one is not dead. For a moment, Shan was not aware that those words had formed in his mind, had not been heard by his ears. He looked up, eyes blazing at the wyvern coming toward him in a graceful glide across the crimsoned sand, and in a space of heartbeats his thrust of anger cooled into a stubborn enmity. "No thanks to you," he said, deliberately aloud. If the wyvern witch wanted to understand him, let her make the effort. He did not try to touch her thoughts with his. Taggy stirred again, and Shan glanced down quickly. The wolverine gasped, opened his eyes, shook his miniature bare head, scattering pellets of sand. He sniffed at a dollop of blood, the dark, alien blood spattered on Shan's breeches, and then his head came up with a reassuring alertness as he looked to where his mate was still worrying the now quiet forktail. With an effort, Taggy got to his feet, Shan aiding him. The man ran his hand down over his ribs, seeking any broken bones. Taggy growled a warning once when that examination brought pain in its wake, but Shan could detect no real damage. As might a cat, the wolverine must have met the shock of that whiptail stroke relaxed enough to escape serious injury. Taggy had been knocked out, but now he was able to navigate again. He pulled free from Shan's grip, lumbering across the sand to the kill. Someone else was crossing that strip of beach, passing the wyvern, the wyvern, the wyverine, a crossbreed of wyvern and wolverine. Passing the wyvern, as he did not see them, Thorvald came directly to Shan. A few seconds later, he had the torn arm stretched across his own bent knee, examining the still bleeding hurt. "That's a nasty one," he commented. Shan heard the words, and they made sense, but the instability of his surroundings was increasing, while Thorvald's handling sent sharp stabs of pain up his arm and somehow into his head, where they ended in red bursts to cloud his sight. Out of the reddish mist which had fogged most of the landscape there emerged a single object, a round, white disk. And in Shan's clouded mind, a well-rooted apprehension stirred. He struck out with his one hand, and through luck connected. The disc flew out of sight, his vision cleared enough so he could sight the wyvern who had been leaning over Thorvald's shoulder, centering her weird weapon on him. Making a great effort, Shan got out the words which he also shaped in his mind as he said them aloud. "You're not taking me over again." There was no emotion to be read on that jewel-banded face or in her unblinking eyes. He caught at Thorvald, determined to get across his warning. A winged wolverine. Think about it and recoil. For it is the end of all things. "Don't let them use those discs on us." "I'll do my best." Only the haze had taken Thorvald again. Did one of the wyverns have a disc focused on them? Were they being pulled into one of those blank periods to awaken as prisoners once more, say, in the cavern of the Veil? The Terran fought with every ounce of willpower to escape unconsciousness, but he failed. This time he did not awaken half drowning in an underground stream or facing a green mist, and there was an ache in his arm which was somehow reassuring with the very insistence of pain. Before opening his eyes, his fingers crossed the smooth slick of a bandage there, went on to investigate by touch a sleep mat such as he had found in the cavern structure. Was he back in that web of rooms and corridors? Shan delayed opening his eyes until a kind of shame drove him to it. He first saw an oval opening almost the length of his body as it was stretched only a foot or two below the sill of that window. And through its transparent surface came the golden light of the sun. No green mist, no crystals mocking the stars. The room in which he lay was small, with smooth walls, much like that in which he had been imprisoned on the island, and there were no other furnishings save the mat on which he rested. Over him was a light cover netted with fibers resembling yarn, with feathers knotted into it to provide a downy upper surface. His clothing was gone, but the single covering was too warm, and he pushed it away from his shoulders and chest as he wiggled up to see the view beyond the window. His torn arm came into full view, his wrist to elbow. It was encased in an From wrist to elbow, it was encased in an opaque skin sheath, unlike any bandage of his own world. Hey, Captain Hardship, welcome in. Hello, hello. Surely that had not come out of any survey aid pack. Shan gazed toward the window, but beyond lay only a reach of sky. Except for a lemon cloud or two ruffled high above the horizon, nothing broke that soft amber curtain. He might be quartered in a tower well above ground level, which did not match his former experience with wyvern accommodations. "Back with us again?" Thorvald, one hand lifting a door panel, came in. His ragged uniform was gone, and he wore only breeches of a sleek green material and his own scuffed and battered boots. Shan settled back on the mat. "Where are we?" "I think you might term this the capital city," Thorvald answered. "In relation to the mainland, we're on an island, well out to sea, westward." "How did we get there?" That climb in the slab, the stream underground, had it been an interior river running under the bed of the sea? But Shan was not prepared for the other's reply. By wishing. By what? Thorvald nodded, his expression serious. They wished us here. Listen, Lanty, when you jumped down to mix it with that fork-tailed thing, did you wish you had the Wolverines with you? Shan thought back. His memories of what had occurred before that battle were none too clear. But yes, he had wished Taggy and Togi present at that moment to distract the enraged beast. You mean I wished them? The whole idea was probably a part of the wyvern jargon of dreaming, and he added, or did I just dream everything? There was the bandage on his arm, the soreness under that bandage. But also there had been Logali's lash brand back in the cavern, which had bitten into his flesh with the pain of a real blow. No, you weren't dreaming. You happened to be turned in one of those handy little gadgets our lady friends here use, and so turned in. Your desire for the Wolverines being pretty powerful just then, they came. Shan grimaced. This was unbelievable. Yet, there were his meetings with Logali and Trav. How could anyone rationally explain them? And how had he, in the beginning, been jumped from the top of the cliff on the island of his marooning into the midst of an underground flood without any conscious memory of an intermediate journey? How does it work? He asked simply. Thorvald laughed. You tell me. They have these discs, one to a wyvern, and they control forces with them. Back there on the beach, we interrupted a class in such control. They were the novices learning their trade. We've stumbled on something here which can't be defined or understood by any of our previous standards of comparison. It's frankly magic, judged by our terms. Are we prisoners? Shan wanted to know. Ask me something I'm aware of. I've been free to come and go within limits. No one's exhibited any signs of hostility. Most of them simply ignore me. I've had 2 interviews via this mind-reading act of theirs, with their rulers or elders or chief sorceresses. All 3 titles seem to apply. They ask questions. I answer as best as I can, but sometimes we appear to have no common meeting ground. Then I ask some questions. They evade gracefully, or reply in a kind of unintelligible double talk, and that's as far as our communication has progressed so far. Taggy and Togi have a run of their own, and as far as I can tell, are better satisfied with life than I am. Oddly enough, they respond more quickly and more intelligently to orders. Perhaps this business of being shunted around by the discs has conditioned them in some way. What about these wyverns? Are they all female? No, but their tribal system is strictly matriarchal, which follows a pattern even Terra once knew. The fertile Earth Mother and her priestesses, who became the witches when the gods overruled the goddesses. The males are few in number and lack the power to activate the discs. In fact, Thorvald laughed ruefully, one gathers that in this civilization our opposite numbers have, more or less, the status of pets at the best, and necessary evils at the worst, which put us at a disadvantage from the start. We are totally blasting this challenge this month. Thank you so much for contributing to Sunday's stream. New plan, live on Warlock forever. So help me if this all turns out to be a dream. So, Noodles, when you said that you had an idea of how this book was going to end and you were going to be mad, that is what I was thinking. That it was going to be like, he's just going to wake up and the whole thing is going to be a dream, and that would make me mad. That would make me so mad. I hate that. mm. You think that they won't take us seriously because we are males? Might just work out that way. Captain Hardship! Thank you so much for the Prime. 5 months. Amazing. Thank you so, so much. I appreciate it. Might just work out that way. I've tried to get through to them about danger from the Throgs, telling them what it would mean to them to have the beetles settle in here for good. They just brush aside the whole idea. Can't you argue that the Throgs are males too? Or aren't they? The survey officer shook his head. That's a point no human can answer. We've been sparring with Throgs for years, and there have been libraries of reports written about them and their behavior patterns, all of which add up to about 2 paragraphs of proven facts and hundreds of surmises, beginning with the probable and skimming out into the wild fantastic. You can claim anything about a Throg and find a lot of very intelligent souls ready to believe you. But whether those beetles squatting over on the mainland are able to answer to he, she, they, your solution is just as good as mine. We've always considered the ones we fight to be males, but they might just as possibly be Amazons. Frankly, these wyverns couldn't care less either. At least, that's the impression they give. Oh, hey, psychotic Yoshi. Hello, welcome in. But anyway, Shan observed, it hasn't come to we're all girls together either. Thorvald laughed again. Not so you can notice. We're not the only unwilling visitor in the vicinity. Shan sat up. A Throg? A something. Non-Warlockian, or non-Wyvern, and perhaps trouble for us. You haven't seen this other? Thorvald sat down cross-legged. The amber light from the window made red gold of his hair, added ruddiness to his less gaunt features. No, I haven't. As far as I can tell, the stranger's not right here. I caught stray thought beams twice, surprise expressed by newly arrived wyverns who met me and apparently expected to be fronted by something quite physically different. Another Terran scout? No. I imagined that to the wyverns we must all look alike, just as we couldn't tell one of them from her sister if their body patterns didn't differ. Discovered one thing about those patterns. The more intricate they run, the higher the power, not of the immediate wearer, but of her ancestors. They're marked when they qualify for their disc, and presented with the rating of the greatest witch in their family line as an inducement to live up to those deeds and surpass them if possible. Quite a bit of logic to get to that. Given the right conditioning, such a system might even work in our service. That nugget of information was the stuff from which survey reports were made, but at the moment the information concerning the other captive was of more value to Shan. He steadied his body against the wall with his good hand and got to his feet. Thorvald watched him. Thorvald's a wizard. What can I say? Limited communication. Now he knows everything. He's got the hot goss.
I am the greatest warrior who has ever lived!
Thanks to @StarHugh Wanderer for my sub-gift.
Oh my god. Gift subs. So much love. Thank you, thank you. 2 months. Yes. Man, I just get so distracted during the alerts. I just get so excited. Okay, Thorvald. 3-month gift. It's a thing. Here we go. I take it you have visions of action? Oh, wrong voice. I take it you have visions of action. Tell me, Lanty, why did you take that header off the cliff to mix it with Forktail? Shan wondered himself. He had no reason for that impulsive act. I don't know. Chivalry? Fair wyvern in distress? The other prodded. Or did the backlash from one of those discs draw you in? I don't know. And why did you use your knife instead of your stunner? Shan was startled. For the first time he realized that he had fronted the greatest native menace they had discovered on Warlock with the most primitive of his weapons. Why had he not tried the stunner on the beast? He had just never thought of it when he had taken that leap into the role of Dragon Slayer. Not that it would have done you any good to try the ray. It has no effect on Forktail. You tried it? Naturally. But you didn't know that. Or did you pick up that information earlier? No, answered Shan slowly. No, I don't know why I used the knife. The stunner would have been more natural. Suddenly, he shivered, and the face he turned to Thorvald was very sober. How much do they control us? He asked, his voice dropping to a half-whisper, as if the walls about them could pick up those words and relay them to other ears. What can they do? A good question. Thorvald lost his light tone. Yes. What can they feed into our minds without our knowing? Perhaps those discs are only window dressings, and they can work without them. A great deal will depend upon the impression we can make on these witches. He began to smile again, more wryly. The name we gave this planet is certainly a misnomer. A warlock is a male sorcerer, not a witch. And what are the chances of our becoming warlocks ourselves? That would absolutely be the first question that I would ask too. Okay, but like, can I be one? Again, Thorvald's smile faded, but he gave a curt little nod to Shan as if approving that thought. That is something we are going to look into. And now, if we have to convince some stubborn females as well as fight Throgs, well, he shrugged, we'll have a busy, busy time. End of chapter 15. And absolutely, I want to be a witch. But, like, can we be one too? Yes. Yes, you can. Mm, 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 mm. All right.
I am the greatest warrior who has ever lived!
Falcor! Oh my god. Thank you so much for the sub. Thank you, thank you. I appreciate it. For those hot emojis. Oh my gosh. Okay. Yes. Yes. But how much do we hate Thorvald? Yeah, I still don't trust him. Didn't didn't trust him to begin with. Don't trust him now. Or didn't trust him in like the fog, the like misty place, and now I don't trust him either. And yeah, you're totally right. Like he didn't know anything, and he said that it was difficult to communicate with them, but he has like so many different answers. I don't know. I don't trust it. Little bud. Little bud. He started at a -5 and now he's like -45. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Totally, totally. Yeah, because like the ones that he's like encountered are absolutely like high powered ladies and like I'm sorry, my dude. No. Mm-mm-mm. Yeah. And then like I didn't like at the end too, and he's like, if we have to convince some stubborn females as well as fight Throgs, it's like Thorvald, get with the picture, all right? Just get with the picture. Okay, oopsie. I bopped around and now I'm lost. Okay. Yeah, same as my planet, yeah. Gotta go back to the old ball and chain, you know what I mean? Yeah. Yeah. Get it? We're men, we have this in common. Hmm. All right. Chapter 16. Third prisoner. We are 77% of the way through. Well, it works as good as new. Shan held his hand and arm out into the full path of the sun. He had just stripped off the skin case bandage to show the raw seam of a half-healed scar, but as he flexed muscles, bent and twisted his arm, there was only a small residue of soreness left. Now what? Or where? He asked Thorvald with some eagerness. Several days' imprisonment in this room had made him impatient for the outer world again. Like the officer, he now wore breeches of the green fabric, the only material known to the Wyverns, and his own badly worn boots. Oddly enough, the Terran's weapons, stunner and knife, had been left to them, a point which made them uneasy, since it suggested that the Wyverns believed they had nothing to fear from clumsy, alien arms. Your guess is as good as mine, Thorvald answered, with double question. But it is you they want to see. They insisted upon it, rather emphatically, in fact. The Wyvern City existed as a series of cell-like hollows in the interior of a rock-walled island. Outside there had been no tampering with the natural rugged features of the escarpment, and within, the silence was almost complete. But for all the Terrans could learn, the population of the stone-walled hive might have been several thousand, or just the handful that they had seen with their own eyes along the passages which had been declared open territory for them. Shan half expected to find again a skull-walled chamber where witches tossed colored sticks to determine his future, but he came with Thorvald into an oval room in which most of the outer wall was a window. You would prefer the dream ending with these two staying as kings with the Wyvern harem. He's half step away from saying, "These crazy dames." And seeing what lay framed in that, Shan halted, again uncertain as to whether he actually saw that, or whether he was willed into visualizing a scene by the choice of his hostesses. They were lower now than the room in which he had nursed his wound, not far above water level, and this window faced the sea. Across a stretch of green water was his red-purple skull, the waves lapping its lower jaw, spreading their foam in between the gaping rock fringe which formed its teeth, and from the eye hollows flapped the clack-clacks on the sea coast, coming and going as if they carried to some imprisoned brain within that giant bone case messages from the outer world. "My dream," Shan said. "Your dream." Thorvald had not echoed that. The answer had come in his brain. Shan turned his head and surveyed the Wyvern awaiting them with a concentration which was close to the rudeness of an outright stare, a stare which held no friendship. For by her skin patterns he knew her for the one who had led their triumvir, who had sent him into the cavern of the mist. And with her was the younger witch he had trapped on the night that all this baffling action had begun. "We meet again," he said slowly. "To what purpose?" "To our purpose. And yours." "I do not doubt that it is yours." The Terran's thoughts fell easily now into a formal pattern he would not have used with one of his own kind. "But I do not expect any good to me." There was no readable expression on her face. He did not expect to see any. But in their uneven mind touch he caught a fleeting suggestion of bewilderment on her part, as if she found his mental processes as hard to understand as a puzzle with few leading clues. "We mean you no ill, Star Voyager. You are far more than we first thought you, for you have dreamed false and have known. Now dream true, and know it also." "Yet," he challenged, "you would set me a task without my consent?" "We have a task for you, but already it was set in a pattern of your true dreaming, and we do not set such patterns, Starman. That is done by the greatest power of all." Greatest and power are both capitalized. Each lives within her appointed pattern from the first awakening to the final dream. First awakening, final dream, all capitalized. So we do not ask of you any more than that which is already laid for your doing. She arose with that languid grace which was a part of their delicate, jeweled bodies, and came to stand beside them, a child in size, making his Terran flesh and bones awkward, clod-like in contrast. She stretched out her four-digit hand, her slender arm ringed with gemmed circles and bands, measuring it beside his own, bearing that livid scar. We are different, Starman, yet still are we both dreamers, and dreams hold power. Your dreams brought you across the dark which lies between sun and distant sun. Our dreams carry us on even stranger roads, and yonder, one of her fingers stiffened to a point, indicating the skull, there is another who dreams with power, a power which will destroy us all unless the pattern is broken speedily. And I must go to seek this dreamer. His vision of climbing through that nose hole was to be realized then. You go. Thorvald stirred, and the wyvern turned her head to him. Alone, she added, for this is your dream only, as it has been from the beginning. There is for each his own dream, and another cannot walk through it to alter the pattern, even to save a life. Shan grinned crookedly, without humor. It seems that I'm elected, he said, as much to himself as to Thorvald. But what do I do with this other dreamer? What your pattern moves you to do, save that you do not slay him. Throg! Thorvald started forward. You can't just walk in on a Throg barehanded and bound by orders such as that. The wyvern must have caught the sense of that vocal protest, for her communication touched them both. We cannot deal with that one, as his mind is closed to us. Yet he is an elder among his kind, and his people have been searching land and sea for him since his air rider broke upon the rocks, and he entered into hiding over there. Make your peace with him if you can, and also take him hence, for his dreams are not ours, and he brings confusion to the reachers when they retire to return to the trails of seeking. Reachers is capitalized. Trails of seeking is capitalized. Going on a star visit to pick up some pizza. Pizza Planet. Must be an important Throg, Shan deduced. They could have an officer of the Beatles under wraps over here. Could we use him to bargain with the rest? Thorvald's frown did not lighten. We've never been able to establish any form of contract in the mines, though our best qualified minds, reinforced by training, have tried. Shan did not take fire at that rather delicate estimate of his own lack of preparation for the carrying out of diplomatic negotiations with the enemy. He knew it was true. But there was one thing he could try, if the wyverns permitted. Will you give a disk of power to this Starman? He pointed to Thorvald. For he is my elder one, and a reacher of knowledge. With such a focus his dream could march with mine when I go to the Throg, and perhaps that can aid in my doing what I could not accomplish alone. For that is the secret of my people, Elder One. We link our powers together to make a shield against our enemies, a common tool for the work we must do. And so it is with us also, Star Voyage. We are not so unlike as the foolish might think. We learned much of you while you both wandered in the place of false dreams, but our power discs are our own, and we cannot be given to a stranger while their owners live. However, she turned again with an abruptness foreign to the usual wyvern manner and faced the older Terran. The officer might have been obeying in unvoiced order as he put out his hands and laid them palm to palm on those she held out to him, bending his head so gray eyes met golden ones. The web of communication which had held all three of them snapped. Thorvald and the Wyvern were linked in a tight circuit which excluded Shan. Then the latter became conscious of movement beside him. The younger Wyvern had joined him to watch the clack-clacks in their circling of the bare dome of the Skull Island. "Why do they fly so?" Shan asked her. "Within they nest, care for their young. Also they hunt the rock creatures that swarm in the lower darkness." The rock creatures? If the skull's interior was infested by some other native fauna, he wanted to know it. By some method of her own, the young Wyvern conveyed a strong impression of revulsion, which was her personal reaction to the rock creatures. "Yet you imprison the Throg here," he remarked. "Not so." Her denial was instantaneous and vehement. "The other worlder fled into that place in spite of our calling. There he stays in hiding. Once we drew him out of the sea, but he broke the power and fled inside again." "Broke free?" Shan pounced upon that. "From disk control?" "But surely—" Her reply held something of wonder. "Why do you ask, Star Voyager? Did you not also break free from the power of the disk which I held you by the underground ways, awakening in the river? Do you then rate this other one as less than your own breed, that you think him incapable of the same action?" "Of Throgs I know as much as this." He held up his hand, measuring off a fraction of space between thumb and forefinger. "Yet you knew them before you came to this world." "My people have known them for long. We have met and fought many times among the stars." "And never have you talked mind to mind?" "Never. We have sought for that, but there has been no communication between us, neither of mind nor of voice." "This one you name Throg is truly not as you," she assented. "And we are not as you, being alien and female. Yet, Starman, you and I have shared a dream." Shan stared at her, startled, not so much by what she said as the human shading of those words in his mind. Or had that also been illusion? "In the veil, that creature which came to you on wings when you remembered that. A good dream, though it came out of the past and so was false in the present. But I have gathered it in my own store. Such a fine dream, one that you have cherished." "Trav was to be cherished," he agreed soberly. "I found her in a broken sleep cage at a spaceport when I was a child. We were both cold and hungry, alone and hurt, so I stole and was glad that I stole Trav. For a little space we both were very happy." Forcibly, he stifled memory. "So, though we are unlike in body and in mind, yet we find beauty together, if only in a dream. Therefore, between your people and mine there can be a common speech. And I may show you my dream store for your enjoyment, Star Voyager." A flickering of pictures, some weird, some beautiful, all a little distorted, not only by haste, but also by the haze of alienness which was a part of her memory pattern, crossed Shan's mind. "Such a sharing would be a rich feast," he agreed. "All right." Those crisp words in his own tongue brought Shan away from the window to Thorvald. The survey officer was no longer locked hand to hand with the Wyvern Witch, but his features were alive with a new eagerness. "We are going to try your idea, Lanty. They'll provide me with a new, unmarked disc, show me how to use it, and I'll do what I can to back you with it. But they insist that you go today." "What do they really want me to do? Just rout out that Throg? Or try to talk him into being a go-between with his people? That does come under the heading of dreaming." "They want him out of there, back with his own kind, if possible. Apparently he's a disruptive influence for them. He causes some kind of mental foul-up which interferes drastically with their power. They haven't been able to get him to make any contact with them. This Elder One is firm about your being the one ordained for the job, and that you'll know what action to take when you get there. Must have thrown the sticks for me again, Shan commented. Well, they've definitely picked you to smoke out the Throg, and they can't be talked into changing their minds about that. I'll be the smoked one if he has blaster. They say he's unarmed. What do they know about our weapons or the Throg's? The other one has no arms. Wyvern words in his mind again. This fact gives him great fear. That which he has depended upon is broken, and since he has no weapons, he is shut into a prison of his own terrors. But an adult Throg, even unarmed, was not to be considered easy meat, Shan thought. Armored with horny skin, armed with claws and those crushing mandibles of the beetle mouth. A third again as tall as he himself was. No, even unarmed, the Throg had to be considered a menace. Shan was still thinking along that line as he splashed through the surf, which broke about the lower jaw of the Skull Island, climbed up one of the pointed rocks, which masqueraded as a tooth, and reached for a higher hold to lead him to the nose slit, the gateway to the alien's hiding place. The clack-clacks screamed and dived about him, highly resentful of his intrusion, and when they grew so bold as to buffet him with their wings, threaten him with their tearing beaks, he was glad to reach the broken rock edging his chosen door and duck inside. Once there, Shan looked back. There was no sighting the cliff window where Thorvald stood, nor was he aware in any way of mental contact with the survey officer. Their hope of such a linkage might be futile. Shan was reluctant to venture farther. His eyes had sufficiently adjusted to the limited supply of light, and now the Terran brought out the one aid the Wyverns had granted him, a green crystal, such as those which had played the role of stars on the cavern roof. He clipped its simple loop, setting to the front of his belt, leaving his hands free. Then, having filled his lungs for the last time with clean, sea-washed air, he started into the dome of the skull. There was a fetid thickness to this air, only a few feet away from the outer world. The odor of clack-clack droppings and refuse from their nests was strong, but there was an added staleness, as if no breeze ever scooped out the old atmosphere to replace it with new. Fragile bones crunched under Shan's boots, but as he drew away from the entrance, the pale glow of the crystal increased its radiance, emitting a light not unlike that of the phosphorescent bushes, so that he was not swallowed up by dark. The cave behind the nose hole narrowed quickly into a narrow cleft which pierced into the bowl of the skull. Shan proceeded with caution, pausing every few steps. There came a murmur, rising now and again to a shriek, issuing, he guessed, from the clack-clack rookery above, and the pound of sea waves was also a vibration carrying through the rock. He was listening for something else, at the same time testing the ill-smelling air for that betraying muskiness which spelled Throg. Sometimes it looks like Lil Bean is eating Fantastic Noodles instead of thanking Fantastic Noodles for his food. No arguments. When a twist in the narrow passage cut off the splotch of daylight, Shan drew his stunner. The strongest bolt from that could not jolt a Throg into complete paralysis, but it would slow up any attack. Red, pinpoints of red, were edging a break in the rock wall. They were gone in a flash. Eyes, perhaps of the rock dwellers which the Wyverns hated. More red dots, farther ahead. Shan listened for a sound he could identify, but smell came before sound. That trace of effluvia, which in force could sicken a Terran, was his guide. The cleft ended in a space to which the limited gleam of the crystal could not provide a far wall, but that faint light did show him his quarry. The Throg was not on his feet, ready for trouble, but hunched close to the wall, and the alien did not move at Shan's coming. Did the beetle sight him? Shan wondered. He moved cautiously, and the round head, with its bulbous eyes, turned a fraction. The mandibles about the ugly mouth opening quivered. Yes, the Throg could see him. But still the alien made no move to rise out of his crouch, to come at the Terran. Then Shan saw the fall of rock, the stone which pinned a double-kneed leg to the floor, and in a circle about the prisoner were the small, crushed, furred things which had come to prey on the helpless, to be slain themselves by the well-aimed stones which were the Throg's only weapons of defense. Shane sheathed his stunner. It was plain the Throg was helpless and could not reach him. He tried to concentrate mentally on a picture of the scenes before him, hoping that Thorvald or one of the wyverns could pick it up. There was no answer, no direction. Choice of action remained solely his. The Terran made the oldest friendly gesture of his kind, his empty hands held up, palm out. There was no answering move from the Throg. Neither of the other's upper limbs stirred, their claws still gripping the small rocks in readiness for throwing. All Shan's knowledge of the alien's history argued against an unarmed advance. The Throg's marksmanship, as bore out by the circle of small bodies, was excellent. And one of those rocks might well thud against his own head, with fatal results. Yet he had been sent there to get the Throg free and out of wyvern territory. So rank was the beetle smell of the other that Shan coughed. What he needed now was the aid of the wolverines, a diversion to keep the alien busy. But this time, there was no disc working to produce Taggy and Togi out of thin air, and he could not continue to just stand there, staring at the Throg. There remained the stunner. Life on the dumps tended to make a man a fast draw, a matter of survival for the fastest and most accurate marksman. And now one of Shan's hands swept down with a speed which, learned early, was never really to be forgotten. He had the rod out and was spraying on tight beam straight at the Throg's head before the first stone struck his shoulder and his weapon fell from a numbed hand. But a second stone tumbled out of the Throg's claw. The alien tried to reach for it, its movements slow, uncertain. Shan, his arm dangling, went in fast, bracing his good shoulder against the boulder which pinned the Throg. The alien aimed a blow at the Terran's head, but again, so slowly Shan had no difficulty in evading it. The boulder gave, rolled, and Shan cleared out of range, back to the opening of the cleft, pausing only to scoop up his stunner. For a long moment the Throg made no move. His dazed wits must have been working at very slow speed. Then the alien heaved up his body to stand erect, favoring the leg which had been trapped. Shan tensed, waiting for a rush. What now? Would the Throg refuse to move? If so, what could he do about it? With the impact of a blow, the message Shan had hoped for struck into his mind, but his initial joy at the contact was wiped out with the same speed. Throg ship. Overhead. The Throg stood away from the wall, limped out, heading for Shan, or perhaps only the cleft in which he stood. Swinging the stunner awkwardly in his left hand, the Terran retreated, mentally trying to contact Thorvald once more. There was no answer. He was well up into the cleft, moving crabwise, unwilling to turn his back on the Throg. The alien was coming as steadily as his injured limb would allow, trying for the exit to the outer world. A Throg ship overhead. Had the castaway somehow managed to call his own kind? And what if he, Shan Lanty, were to be trapped between the alien and a landing party from the flyer? He did not expect any assistance from the wyverns. And what could Thorvald possibly do? From behind him, at the entrance of the nose slit, he heard a sound which was neither the scolding of a clack-clack, nor the eternal growl of the sea. End of the chapter. We have time for one more. Also, okay, so I know that Terrans and Throgs have been fighting since, like, the beginning of time or whatever, but why is the first reaction when you see a Throg that is clearly hurt, clearly not in the best of shape, to attack it. Like, why not just be like, hey, bud, we don't know that much about each other as species or personally. Let's chat. What's your end game? Would you like help? Because we kind of need you to move. Like, why is talking not the first thing? Why is like, let me get the stunner? Let me threaten immediately. Sure, sure. I guess those are all accurate. Probably. I mean, it is absolutely believable. I'm not saying it's not believable. Oh, Star, you like the little doggo with the heart? It's relatively new. Yes, yes. Mm. Will Lil Bean play? Let's see. Come on, Lil Bean. You can do it. Oh, Lil Bean will not play. Red Talus comes in with a hydrate. Just completely ignoring. You know, so I used to think that when Lil Bean reached like a certain level, he would change into like a different color, like his coat would change, but it hasn't. So I don't really know. I don't know. I think I need to look into it. Maybe I'm supposed to change it. I don't know. Nothing really happens. I don't even know if he celebrates it. Yeah, you've seen it as with other stream pets. I think mine is just broken. Lil Bean is just he's a little injured. He's going through a time. He has no time for playing and no time for changing his coat. Lil Bean is perfect the way he is. Agreed. Agreed. The only change is that he refuses to be challenged. He's turning the other cheek. What can I say? You got to know when to hold him, know when to fold him, know when to walk away, know when to run. How funny would it have been if Lil Bean was like, "All right, Star, I'll play with you, but not with Wadsworth." We'll see. I probably need to like refresh or restart the app. I would have laughed really hard if that was the case. All right, here we go. Last chapter. Well, of the day. Not really the last chapter. Chapter 17. We are 83% of the way through. Oh, thank you so much for the hydrate. Thank you, thank you. I need it. I know I say that or maybe I don't say this, I don't know. Have a have water off stream, but I'm pretty sure the most hydrated I am is when I'm streaming. Probably a terrible thing. Yeah, probably. Thank you so much for that hydrate. All right. Throg Justice. The musty stench was so strong that Shan could no longer fight the demands of his outraged stomach. He rolled on his side, retching violently until the sour smell of his illness battled the foul odor of the ship. Yeah. Yeah. Constantly. Well, and like every time in this story that they're talking about like how thirsty they are or like how dry their lips are, it's like, my lips are really dry right now. I'm kind of thirsty. Yeah, yeah. Just constantly talking for like the 3 hours. Mhm. Retching. There we go. Okay. His memories of how he had come into this place were vague. His body was a mass of dull pain, as if he had been scorched. Scorched. Had the Throgs used one of their energy whips to subdue him? The last clear thing he could recall was that slow withdrawal down the cleft inside the skull rock. The Throg, not too far away. The sound from the entrance. A Throg prisoner. Through the pain and the sickness, the horror of that bit doubly deep. Terrans did not fall alive into Throg hands, not if they had the means of ending their existence within reach. But his hands and arms were caught behind him in an unbreakable lock. Some gadget not unlike the Terran force bar used to restrain criminals, he decided groggily. The cubby in which he lay was black dark, but the quivering of the deck and the bulkheads about him told Shan that the ship was in flight, and there could be but two destinations, either the camp where the Throg force had taken over the Terran installations, or the mothership of the raiders. If Thorvald's earlier surmise was true, and the aliens were hunting a Terran to talk in the transport, then they were heading for the camp. And because a man who still lives and who is not yet broken can also hope, Shan began to think ahead to the camp and a faint, thin chance of escape. For on the surface of Warlock there was a thin chance, in the mothership of the Throgs, none at all. Thorvald and the Wyverns, could he hope for any help from them? Shan closed his eyes against the thick darkness and tried to reach out to touch somewhere. Thorvald with his disc, or perhaps the Wyvern who had talked of Trav and shared dreams. Shan focused his thoughts on the young Wyvern witch, visualizing with all the detail he could summon out of memory the brilliant patterns about her slender arms, her thin, fragile wrists, those other designs overlaying her features. He could see her in his mind, but she was only a puppet, without life, certainly without power. Thorvald. Now Shan fought to build a mental picture of the survey officer, making his stand at that window, grasping his disc, with the sun bringing gold to his hair and showing the bronze of his skin. Those gray eyes, which could be ice. That jaw with the set of a trap upon occasion. And Shan made contact. He touched something, a flickering light, like a badly tuned tri-D, far more fuzzy than the mind pictures the Wyvern had paraded for him. But he had touched, and Thorvald, too, had been aware of his contact. Shan fought to find that thread of awareness again. Patiently, he once more created his vision of Thorvald, adding every detail he could recall, small things about the other which he had not known that he had noticed. The tiny arrow-shaped scar near the base of the officer's throat, the way his growing hair curled at the ends, the look of one eyebrow slanting abruptly towards his hairline when he was dubious about something. Shan strove to make a figure as vividly as Logally and Trav had been in the mist of the illusion. Where? This time Shan was prepared. He did not let that mind image dissolve in his excitement at recapturing the link. Throgship. He said the words aloud over and over, but still he held to his picture of Thorvald. Will. Only that one word. The thread between them snapped again. Only then did Shan become conscious of a change in the ship's vibration. Were they setting down? And where? Let it be at the camp. It must be the camp. Yes, something about the idea of a boy with pet wolverines. Yes, yes. Hello, hi, welcome, and it's good to see you, Gentle Fox. Good to see you. The Wolverines are the MVP. Absolutely. And where? Let it be the camp. It must be the camp. There was no jar at that landing. Just that 1 second the vibration told him the ship was alive and airborne, and the next a dead quiet testified that they had landed. Shan, his sore body stiff with tension, waited for the next move on the part of his captors. He continued to lie in the dark, still queasy from the stench of the cell, too keyed up to try to reach Thorvald. There was a dull grating over his head, and he looked up eagerly, to be blinded by a strong beam of light. Claws hooked painfully under his arms, and he was manhandled up and out, dragged along a short passage, and pitched free of the ship, falling hard upon trodden earth and rolling over, gasping as the seared skin of his body was rasped and abraded. The Terran lay face up now, and as his eyes adjusted to the light, he saw a ring of Throg heads blotting out the sky as they inspected their catch impassively. The mouth mandibles of one moved with a faint clicking. Again, claws fastened in his armpits, brought Shan to his feet, holding him erect. Then the Throg who had given that order moved closer. His hand claws clasped a small metal plate surmounted by a loop of thin wire over which was stretched a web of threads glistening in the sun. Holding that loop on a level with his mouth, the alien clicked his mandibles, and those sounds became barely distinguishable, basic galactic words. You, Throg meat. For a moment Shan wondered if the alien meant that statement literally, or was it a conventional expression for a prisoner among their land? Do as told. That was clear enough, and for the moment the Terran did not see that he had any choice in the matter, but Shan refused to make any sign of agreement to either of those two limited statements. Perhaps the beetles did not expect any. The alien who had pulled him to his feet continued to hold him erect, the attention of the Throg with the translator switched elsewhere. From the alien ship emerged a second party. The Throg in their midst was unarmed and limping. Although to Terran eyes one alien was the exact counterpart of the other, Shan thought that this one was the prisoner in the skull cave. Yet the indications now suggested that he had only changed one captivity for another and was in disgrace among his kind. Why? The Throg limped up to front the leader with the translator, and his guards fell back. Again mandibles clicked, were answered, though the sense of that exchange eluded Shan. At one point in the report, if report it was, he himself appeared to be under discussion, for the injured Throg waved a hand claw in the Terran's direction. But the end to the conference came quickly enough, and in a manner which Shan found shocking. Two of the guards stepped forward, caught at the injured Throg's arms, and drew him away, leading him out into a space beyond the grounded ship. They dropped their hold on him, returning at a trot. The officer clicked in order. Blasters were unholstered, and the Throg in the field shriveled under a vicious concentration of crossbolts. Shan gasped. He certainly had no liking for Throgs, but this execution carried overtones of a cold-blooded ferocity which transcended anything he had known, even in the callous brutality of the dumps. Limp, and more than a little sick again, he watched the Throg officer turn away, and a moment later he was forced along in the other's wake to the domes of the once Terran camp. Not just to the camp in general, he discovered a minute later, but to that structure which had housed the comm unit, linking them with ships cruising the solar lanes and with patrols. So Thorvald had been right. They needed a Terran to broadcast, to cover their tracks here and lay a trap for the transport. Shan had no idea how much time he had passed among the wyverns. The transport with its load of unsuspecting settlers might already be in the system of Circe, plotting a landing orbit around Warlock, broadcasting her recognition signal and a demand for a beam to ride her in. Only, this time the Throgs were out of luck. They had picked up one prisoner who could not help them, even if they wanted to do so. The mysteries of the highly technical installations in this dome were just that to Shan Lanty. Complete mysteries. He had not the slightest idea of how to activate the machines, let alone broadcast in the proper code. A cold spot of terror gathered in his middle, spreading outward through his smarting body, for he was certain that the Throgs would not believe that. They would consider his protestations of ignorance as a stubborn refusal to cooperate, and what would happen to him then would be beyond human endurance. Could he bluff? Play for time? But what would that time buy him except to delay the inevitable? In the end, that small hope based on his momentary contact with Thorvald, made him decide to try that bluff. There had been changes in the calm dome since the capture of the cap. A squat box on the floor sprouted a collection of tubes from its upper surface. Perhaps that was some Throg equivalent of Terran equipment in place of the wide table facing the door. The Throg leader clicked into his translator. "You call ship." Shan was thrust down into the operator's chair, his bound arms still twisted behind him so that he had to lean forward to keep on the seat at all. Then the Throg who had pushed him there roughly forced a set of comm earphones and speech mic onto his head. "Call ship," clicked the alien officer. So time must be running out. Now was the moment to bluff. Shen shook his head, hoping that the gesture of negation was common to both their species. "I don't know the code," he said aloud. The Throg's bulbous eyes gazed at his moving lips. Then the translator was held before the Terran's mouth. Shen repeated his words, heard them reissue as a series of clicks, and waited. So much depended now on the reaction of the beetle officer. Would he summarily apply pressure to enforce his order? Or would he realize that it was possible that all Terrans did not know that code, and so he could not produce in a captive's head any knowledge that he had never been there? With or without physical coercion. Apparently the latter logic prevailed for the present. The Throg drew the translator back to his mandibles. "When call ship, you answer. Make lip talk your words. Say bad sickness here, need help. Code man dead. You talk in his place. I listen. You say wrong, you die. You die a long time. Hurt bad, all the time." Clear enough. So he had been able to buy a little more time. But how soon before the incoming ship would call? The Throgs seemed to expect it. Shan licked his blistered lips. He was sure that the Throg officers meant exactly what he said in that last grisly threat. Only, would anyone, Throg or human, live very long in this camp if Shan got his warning through? The transport would have been accompanied on the big jump by a patrol cruiser, especially now with Throgs littering deep space the way they were in this sector. Let Shan alert the ship, and the cruiser would know. Swift, punitive action would be visited on the camp. Throgs could begin to make their helpless prisoner regret his rashness. Then, all of them would be blotted out together, prisoner and captors alike, when the cruiser came in. If that was his last chance, he'd play it that way. The Throgs would kill him anyhow. He hadn't the least doubt of that. They kept no long-term Terran prisoners, and never had. And at least he could take this nest of devil beetles along with him. Not that the thought did anything to dampen the fear which made him weak and dizzy. Shan Lanty might be tough enough to fight his way out of the dumps, but to stand up and defy Throgs face to face like a video hero was something else. He knew that he could not do any spectacular act. If he could hold out to the end without cracking, he would be satisfied. 2 more Throgs entered the dome. They stalked to the far end of the table which held the comm equipment, and frequently pausing to consult a Terran work tape set in a reader, they made adjustments to the spotter beam broadcaster. They worked slowly, but competently, testing each circuit, preparing to draw in the Terran transport, holding the large ship until they had it helpless on the ground. The Terran began to wonder how they proposed to take the ship over once they did have it on planet. Transports were armed for ground fighting. Although they rode in on the beam broadcast from the camp, they were prepared for unpleasant surprises on a planet's surface. Such were certainly not unknown in the history of survey, which meant that the Throgs had in turn some assault weapon they believed superior, for they radiated confidence now. But could they handle a patrol cruiser, ready to fight? The Throg technicians made a last check of the beam, reporting in clicks to the officer. The alien gave an order to Shan's guard before following them out. A loop of wire rope dropped over the Terran's head, tightened about his chest, dragging him back against the chair until he grunted with pain. 2 more loops, made him secure in a most uncomfortable posture, and then he was left alone in the comm dome. An abortive struggle against the wire rope taught him the folly of such an effort. He was in deep freeze as far as any bodily movement was concerned. Shan closed his eyes, settled to that same concentration he had labored to acquire on the Throg ship. If there was any chance of the Wyvern communication working again, here and now was the time for it. Again he built his mental picture of Thorvald, as detailed as he made it in the Throg ship, and with that to the forefront of his mind, Shan strove to pick up the thread which could link them. Was the distance between this camp and the secret city of the Wyvern too great? Did the Throgs unconsciously dampen out that mental reaching as the Wyverns had said they did when they had sent him to free the captive in the skull? Drops gathered in the unkempt tight curls of his head, trickled down to sting on his tender skin. He was bathed in the moisture summoned by an effort as prolonged and severe as if he labored physically under a hot sun at the top speed of which his body was capable. Thorvald. Thorvald! But not standing by the window in the Wyvern stronghold. Thorvald, with the amethyst of heavy Warlockian foliage at his back. So clear was the new picture that Shan might have stood only a few feet away. Thorvald there, with the Wolverines at his side, and behind him sun glinted on the gem-patterned skin of more than one Wyvern. Where? That demand from the survey officer, curt, clear, so perfect the word might have rung audibly through the dome. The camp! Shan hurled that back, frantic with fear that once again their contact might fail. They want me to call in the transport, he added that. How soon? Don't know. They have the guide beam set. I'm to say there's illness here. They know I can't code. All he could see now was Thorvald's face, intent, the officer's eyes cold sparks of steel, bearing the empress of a will as implacable as a Throg's. Shan added his own decision. I'll warn the ship off. They'll send in the patrol. There was no change in Thorvald's expression. Hold out as long as you can. Cold enough. No promise of help. Nothing on which to build hope. Yet the fact that Thorvald was on the move, away from the Wyvern City, meant something, and Shan was sure that thick vegetation could be found only on the mainland. Not only was Thorvald ashore, but there were Wyverns with him. Could the officer have persuaded the witches of Warlock to forsake their hands-off policy and join him in an attack on the Throg camp? No promise, not even a suggestion that the party Shan had envisioned was moving in his direction, yet somehow he believed that they were. There was a sound from the doorway of the dome. Shan opened his eyes. There were Throgs entering, one to go to the guide beam, two heading for his chair. He closed his eyes again in a last attempt, backed by every remaining ounce of his energy and will. Ship's in range. Throgs here. Thorvald's face, dimmer now, snapped out while a blow of Shan's jaw rocked his head cruelly, made his ears sing, his eyes water. He saw Throgs. Throgs only. And one held the translator. You, talk. A tri-jointed arm reached across his shoulder, triggered a lever, pressed a button. The head set cramping his ear, let out a sudden growl of sound. The comm was activated. A claw jammed the mic closer to Shan's lips, but also slid in range the webbed loop of the translator. Shan shook his head at the incoming rattle of code. The Throg with the translator was holding the other head set close to his own ear pit, and the claws of the guard came down on Shan's shoulders in a cruel grip, a threat of future brutality. The rattle of code continued while Shan thought furiously. This was it. He had to give a warning, and then the aliens would do to him just what the officer had threatened. Shan could not seem to think clearly. It was as if in his efforts to contact Thorvald, he had exhausted some part of his brain, so that now he was dazed just when he needed quick wits the most. This whole scene had a weird unreality. He had seen its like 1,000 times on fiction tapes, the Terran hero menaced by aliens, intent on saving. Was it out of one of those fiction tapes he had devoured in the past that Shan recalled that scrap of almost forgotten information? The Terran began to speak into the mic, for there had come a pause in the rattle of code. He used Terran, not basic, and he shaped the words slowly. Warlock calling. Trouble. Sickness here. Comm officer dead. He was interrupted by another burst of code. The claws of his guard twisted into the naked flesh of his shoulders in vicious warning. Warlock calling, he repeated. Need help? Who are you? The demand came in basic. On board the transport, they would have a list of every member of the survey team. Lanty. Shan drew a deep breath. He was so conscious of those claws on his shoulder, of what would follow. This is Mayday, he said distinctly, hoping desperately that someone in the control cabin of the ship, now in orbit, would catch the true meaning of that ancient call of complete disaster. Mayday. Beetles. Over and out. End of the chapter. Ooh. We are so close to finishing. But that's where we're gonna end today. Oh, I know, a cliffhanger. It's like a TV show. You gotta wait to find out. You gotta come back. Yes. Will they be saved? Or not? What's next? I don't know. I have a list, like a short list. I have a long list, of course I do. But I have a short list of ones, and I'm not sure what vibe I want to do next. We'll see. We'll see. But I don't have like a one yet. I don't know. I don't know what the vibe is. March? Are there good or April? Spring?